Chapter 953. Hearing his words, Feng Ling paused, looked up at him, or even glared at him. She must have been suppressing her temper because of what happened last night. Originally, he wanted to use force, but seeing her expression, he knew he couldn't keep suppressing her, so he simply said in a low voice, "For so many years, there is no normal place except 11 base where you have lived. Now that you finally have some peaceful and normal days, can't you enjoy them for a few more days?" "I'm used to it." She lowered her eyes and struggled in his arms. "Let go of me." "No, come back with me. We haven't eaten yet." The man took her to the sofa, pressed her down on the sofa, picked up his cell phone to check the time, and said, "What do you want to eat?" "I don't think the food in the base's canteen is as good as the food you make or the takeout I eat these days." Feng Ling had no desire to live now and just wanted to leave as soon as possible. She not only helped him this and that, but also slept with him so openly. What was this? The man lowered his eyes to look at her, bent down to look at her with displeasure, raised his hand to pinch her chin, bent down to her face, and his warm breath sprinkled on her skin. "Then go out to eat." Feng Ling raised her eyes. "Li Nanheng, I've thanked you and done what you asked me to do. What else do you want?" What a stubborn little girl. With such a straightforward temper, it was really fortunate that he was patient enough with her. Otherwise, who knew how angry he would be one day? He would really throw her on the bed and eat her alive. Although she helped him with her hand last night, it didn't mean that he was satisfied. She went back to her room to sleep, and he took a cold shower in the bathroom for a long time. He didn't sleep much all night. In the early morning, he came to her room and held her in his arms, and then he fell asleep. However, after the little girl woke up, she turned her back on him. Yesterday, when he held her in his arms and kissed her in the bathroom, she didn't dare to move. "Nothing. It's nothing. I helped you solve this problem. Do you think the reward last night is enough?" The man didn't explain more but followed her angry words. "Go out to eat with me first. It's already noon. Come with me to buy some things in the afternoon. It depends on your performance in the next 2 days. If you perform well, you can go back to the base." Feng Ling instantly stared at him as though she was looking at a lunatic. "Why should I accompany you to eat and shop with you?" The man frowned. "Why do you think so?" The man suddenly smiled evilly. He raised her hand to his lips and seemed to be about to kiss it. Feng Ling was about to withdraw her hand, but the man suddenly pressed her hand against his chest and kissed her lips accurately. The man pressed Feng Ling against the back of the sofa and kissed her harshly several times. When she raised her hands and feet to push and kick him, the man curved his lips into a smile and held her hand to kiss it. "It's probably because it's rare for me to go out for a stroll and I lack a little attendant by my side. You're just right." "Feng Ling," she pushed the man away. At this time, the man did let go of her and was easily pushed away. Li Nanheng took a few steps back and looked at Feng Ling, who was angry but couldn't shout at him because of various things. She looked like a kitten holding its sharp claws but hesitating whether to scratch him or not. His heart itched. He wanted to kiss her again, but Feng Ling had already got up and walked quickly back to the bedroom. "What are you going to do?" the man asked with a smile. Feng Ling didn't look back and answered grumpily, "Wash my face and brush my teeth. Clean up and go be an attendant." The smile on Li Nanheng's lips instantly widened. He walked over and stood in front of the bedroom door, watching Feng Ling, who had entered the bathroom and was about to brush her teeth. Feng Ling had a hidden temper in her bones, but she was very tolerant, such as now. But if other men dared to treat her like this, they would probably get the same result as the fat commander. After all, her heart was still with him, but the girl obviously didn't understand these feelings. It didn't matter that she didn't understand. He could teach her slowly. It didn't matter that she hadn't lived a normal life since she was a child. He could slowly accompany her to experience it. His little girl, no matter whether she had short hair or long hair, no matter whether she was pretending to be a man or a woman, since she had compromised under her chest cloth, he had to admit defeat. He had never been patient in his life, but at this moment, he used all his patience on her. Feng Ling was taken to eat by Li Nanheng, and it was Western food. He asked her to order, but she didn't know what was delicious, so she didn't order anything and just let him order. However, Li Nanheng ordered the food that the two girls were eating at the next table and added various blueberry-flavored desserts. Feng Ling ate until she was full. When she left the Western restaurant, although she didn't want to talk to him, she still asked, "Boss, why did you bring me to eat Western food? From today onwards, before we return to the base, we will change the cuisine of different countries for every meal and let you taste every taste." Feng Ling. Did he think she was a pig? After the meal, they passed by the largest amusement park in Los Angeles. Li Nanheng asked her if she wanted to go in. Feng Ling glanced inside and shook her head. She was not interested in these things, but the man still took her in and walked around. Although she didn't want to play any games, in the end, the man still bought a Disney hairpin and forced it on her head. This is what women wear. Feng Ling felt helpless about the pair of Mickeys on her head. Li Nanheng pointed to a young couple not far away. "Look at them. Don't men wear it too?" Feng Ling looked at the boy who was only about 17 or 18 years old and his girlfriend. The two of them were smiling sweetly and sharing the same Mickey-shaped ice cream. She quickly looked away and no longer said anything about this matter, in case Li Nanheng continued to follow suit. After leaving the amusement park, she drove to the business street. In the mall, Li Nanheng asked her to accompany him to buy things, but she didn't know what was wrong with this man. Whenever they passed by a good-looking women's clothing store, he would stop outside for a moment and then turn back to ask her, "Which one do you like?" Feng Ling looked at the various beautiful women's clothing styles and glanced at him strangely. "Boss, are you going to buy clothes for your girlfriend? You shouldn't ask me. I don't have any aesthetic standards for women." The man continued to walk forward and casually said, "Then try to find a woman's aesthetic standards." Feng Ling. Chapter 954. She was a man. Why was she looking for a woman's aesthetic? Why was it so strange? Feng Ling followed Li Nanheng thoughtfully, watching his back in front of her. Did he know she was a woman? But it shouldn't be. He hadn't found out. She didn't even take off her clothes. He was just suspicious before, but hadn't this suspicion been dispelled? Li Nanheng took her around the business street for the whole afternoon and left in the evening. Feng Ling was already carrying a lot of things in her hands, all kinds of clothes, supplies, shoes, and some things that she didn't think were necessary. She even bought skincare products. Li Nanheng said he wanted to buy things, but it seemed that everything was double. The only thing that was consistent with his previous statement was that she was indeed the one who carried everything from the back, just like a little follower. She finally followed him back to the car. The man opened the trunk of the car and looked back at her who was carrying the things with great difficulty but refused to ask for his help. He smiled faintly. "Is it very heavy?" Feng Ling walked forward stubbornly and put the things in her hands into the trunk one by one. Li Nanheng stood on the side with his arms crossed, watching all her movements, and the smile on his lips grew wider and wider. It was already dark in Los Angeles, and there were only the two of them in the dark parking lot with the cold wind blowing. After putting everything in place, Feng Ling was about to get into the car, when the man suddenly held her hand and said lightly above her head, "All right, we can go to the movies." With that, he took her in the direction of the largest cinema on this business street. Feng Ling understood what was going on and was pulled forward. When she came back to herself, she asked slowly, "Watch a movie." "What movie?" "What movie do you want to watch?" "I rarely go to places like the cinema. I'll just look around and choose a movie I like," the man said matter-of-factly. After being held by him for a few steps, Feng Ling rushed to withdraw her hand. However, when she tried to pull her hand out, the man directly pulled her to his side and raised his arm to hold her waist. As he walked, he spoke calmly and lowly, "Don't move. Be good." Feng Ling. "Boss, I don't want to watch a movie. I'd better go back. If I want you to watch a movie, go obediently and..." The man looked down at her. "You should experience everything while you're young. Just treat it as accompanying me. I haven't been there either. I'm very young." Feng Ling pursed her lips. "I'm not even 18 yet." Li Nanheng immediately glanced at her coldly. "Are you saying I'm old?" No, how can boss be old? Even if you're over 40, you'll still be a flower on a high mountain. You won't be old." Li Nanheng sneered. As he walked with her in his arms, he raised his hand and rubbed her head. Little thing, you've learned to be glib. Ling, she really couldn't accept the word little thing. But no matter how hard she tried, she was still brought into the cinema by Li Nanheng. Most of the people who came here were also young people. It seemed that people in every country had popcorn in the cinema. Li Nanheng also bought a large bucket of popcorn and stuffed it into Feng Ling's mouth. Feng Ling had no choice but to follow him in with a large bucket of popcorn. After sitting down in the cinema, she found out that Li Nanheng had actually chosen a romance film that was not very popular in the United States. Usually, Hollywood films or some world-famous and popular films were more popular. This kind of romance film was not very popular in the United States. When she sat down, the seats next to her were empty. Even until the beginning, they were still empty. There were only a few young couples sitting in 2s and 3s in the first few rows, but they weren't here to watch a movie. Anyway, in a cinema in America, in a place with a slightly quieter atmosphere, some daring young men and women would directly feel it here. The only thing lacking was to directly applaud for love here. By the time the film was halfway through, the young couples in the front were already hugging and kissing each other on the man's lap. Feng Ling had been holding the popcorn in her arms. Li Nanheng was not very interested in this kind of film. He turned to look at the girl next to him, only to see that she was eating popcorn while watching the film. She seemed very interested. When the male and female leads in the film had to be separated for a long time because of something, the two of them madly hugged and kissed each other, took off their clothes, and so on. The young couples in the first few rows had already become more and more passionate. Li Nanheng glanced at the girl next to him. The girl's eyes were closed and her head was leaning against the back of the chair. He had thought that he would take her to watch this kind of romance film to enlighten her. But she actually fell asleep. Li Nanheng. At the end of the film, Feng Ling felt the surrounding lights turn on. She instinctively opened her eyes and turned to see that Li Nanheng looked very unhappy. She didn't know if it was because of her, but she only said, "Can we go back now, boss?" "Where do you want to go?" the man asked sternly. "I don't want to go anywhere. I just want to go home." "Go home." Hearing these two words, Li Nanheng's unhappy mood was swept away. He glanced at her again. "And go back to our home?" Feng Ling had just woken up and didn't understand the meaning behind his words. She instinctively nodded and grunted. She got up and was about to leave. Then she paused and looked at him with the popcorn in her arms. "What about this popcorn? Go outside the theater and put it next to a beggar." The car drove back to the apartment. Feng Ling had just gotten out of the car and was about to take something from the trunk when she suddenly felt an unfriendly gaze. She paused and turned back to see that Feng Mingzhu had been waiting for a long time by a car not far away. She didn't know how long she had been waiting there. The moment she saw Feng Mingzhu, the expression on Feng Ling's face was not very happy. She didn't know why she offended her, but whenever they met, nothing happy would happen. Although she never minded it too much, it was really annoying that this Feng Mingzhu always deliberately appeared like this. Feng Ling didn't speak but just took something from the trunk in the back and said, "Boss, I'll go up first." However, before she left, her arm was held by someone. "Stand here and wait." "Don't you have something to say?" "There's nothing to say. Besides, you're not an outsider. There's no need to leave." Stand still." The man coldly glanced at her. Feng Ling hesitated. Although she didn't leave, she didn't look at Feng Mingzhu again. Instead, she simply tidied up the things in the trunk. Chapter 955. Didn't I tell you not to look for me if there's nothing important? Li Nanheng's voice rang behind her, carrying a hint of coldness and alienation. Feng Mingzhu moved her eyes away from Feng Ling and turned to look at Li Nanheng. "Nanheng, my father and grandfather want to see you." She had persisted for so long, but it was all for naught. She really couldn't accept such an outcome. Even if she called for help, she couldn't just give up like this. However, the man only responded with two emotionless words, "No." Feng Mingzhu looked at him in disbelief. "You've repeatedly rejected the Feng family and used my sister's cenotaph as a reason to push me so far away. Right now, They just want to have a meal with you. After all, the death of the military commander is such a big matter, and the Feng family has been involved recently. You can't be like this. Li Nanheng's eyes were cold and without any hesitation. Tell them to go to the Li family to look for the elders. With the Li family's grandfather around, do I still need to show up? But Li Nanheng turned back, picked up the things that had been arranged in the car with one hand, and held Feng Ling's hand with the other. He walked past Feng Mingzhu and went straight to the apartment building. The tall black Hummer reflected the early winter sunlight. Feng Mingzhu stood on the side and looked back at him, only to see the man holding Feng Ling's hand naturally and gentlemanly. The two of them were carrying a lot of things in their other hands, which seemed to be trophies that had been out for a day. They were clearly two men, but they inexplicably made Feng Mingzhu feel uncomfortable. She was so petite and was treated like this by Li Nanheng? What on earth was this? Was he a man or a woman? At this moment, Feng Mingzhu couldn't help but recall the stories of Hua Milan that her grandfather told her when she was young. Although the stories were just stories, in this world, anything could happen. Either this Feng Ling was actually a woman, or Li Nanheng liked men. But Li Nanheng seemed to have no problem with his sexual orientation. The most likely possibility was that Feng Ling was a woman. Feng Mingzhu looked in that direction for a long time, frowned, and suddenly picked up her phone to dial a number. The two had walked some distance away and entered the apartment building. They then walked into the elevator. It was quiet in the elevator. Feng Ling looked at the things in her hands and then at the changing numbers on the elevator. She seemed to be lost in thought. The man's deep voice broke the almost stiff silence. "Are you unhappy?" Feng Ling came back to herself, retracted her gaze, and said in a low voice, "No." He stated mildly, "You don't like Feng Mingzhu." She looked at him in amusement. "Should I like her?" "Whether you like her or not has nothing to do with me, but there are always reasons to hate someone." Li Nanheng was a man who didn't take things too seriously. He didn't care much about Feng Mingzhu's matters and didn't like women complaining endlessly by his ears. However, he didn't like how Feng Ling kept quiet and didn't explain anything. She never complained. He would rather she told him her thoughts occasionally. Why couldn't she learn to be as long-winded and talkative as other women? Feng Ling didn't explain but continued to watch the changing numbers on the elevator in silence. She did want to ask about Feng Mingzhu. For example, if she and Li Nanheng weren't engaged, why did Feng Mingzhu say that she was his fiancée? After all, she was the eldest daughter of the Feng family. If there was no reason, she definitely wouldn't make up such a rumor. But even if she wanted to ask, she didn't know how. When the elevator stopped on the 10th floor, the two walked out. Li Nanheng went to open the door, and Feng Ling walked behind him. She thought for a moment and asked the simplest question, "Boss, have you known Miss Feng for a long time?" "And I saw her when I was a child. It seems that she really likes you." She had heard their previous conversation. Later, when she saw Feng Mingzhu's perseverance, it was not difficult to see how infatuated Feng Mingzhu was with him. To be able to make the eldest daughter of such a family so infatuated, it could be seen that something very romantic must have happened between the two of them or something she couldn't imagine. At this time, Li Nanheng glanced at her, walked in, and put down the things in his hands without speaking. Feng Ling also put down the things. Suddenly, she didn't want to talk anymore and was about to walk in. Seeing her silent back, Li Nanheng said lightly in a low voice, "The Li family and the Feng family are aristocratic families. Although we have known each other since we were young, the number of times I have seen Feng Mingzhu can be counted with 5 fingers. The time we have spent together since we were young is less than a few hours, not even as long as the time I spent holding you to sleep last night." Feng Ling's footsteps paused. The man continued in an orderly voice, "She wants to marry me, but it doesn't mean that I want to marry her. You have to ask about these things later. You don't have to listen to what she says. It's best if you don't even see her again." Feng Ling, I don't think I will have a chance to see her again after returning to the base." She shifted her feet, thought for a moment, and said, "Boss, the elders of the Li family said that although they won't pursue that matter, they still have to receive the punishment that should be received. Has the higher-ups made any decision? What kind of punishment should I receive?" You will only receive a more difficult task than the Rogers Pass. It won't be easier. Just wait patiently. Why are you in such a hurry to receive the punishment? Feng Ling didn't react for a moment and asked blankly, Are you going to infiltrate the terrorist camp as a spy? The man sat on the sofa, holding the phone with his well-defined fingers. He glanced at the message he had just received and turned his head to glance at her indifferently. No, you are too straightforward and not tactful enough to be a spy. You can't count on this kind of thing. Feng Ling inexplicably read from his indifferent tone that he should already know what punishment she would face, but he didn't say it. As long as she was not a spy, she didn't care about anything else. At night, Feng Ling had nothing to do, so she went to the kitchen to cook 2 bowls of noodles. After all, she didn't know how to cook other things, but she could still cook noodles. Although the taste was a little unsatisfactory, at least it was edible. She sent the cooked noodles into the study. At this time, Li Nanhing got up to answer the phone. He looked back and saw that she had entered the study. Seeing the bowl in her hand, he signaled her to come in and put it on the table. Feng Ling walked in and put the bowl down, but the man had already gone out to answer the phone. She looked down at the computer and some documents on the desk, and then saw several pages of pure English documents with Li Nanheng's signature. Chapter 956. The man's handwriting was vigorous and powerful. He didn't look like the boss of a base who had been playing with guns and sticks for so many years. Instead, he looked like a scholar or a business elite. When Feng Ling was a child, she learned some things from the mafia. There was a Chinese man who would teach her how to read and some simple knowledge. Later, when she was in the orphanage, she occasionally attended classes, but she didn't learn much. She wasn't very cooperative. After arriving at the base, Han Jin introduced her to a cultural teacher in the base and specially arranged some courses for her. In addition to training, he would teach her a lot of things. As time went by, Feng Ling gradually made up for a lot of knowledge that she had missed when she was a child. There were many young people who entered the base at a very young age, so there would be special cultural teachers to teach them. Feng Ling was also the best in this aspect and was most liked by the teachers. There were not only boorish men in the base, but even boorish men would not be illiterate. The rules in the base were quite good. At least, Feng Ling could read these Chinese and English clearly. Looking at the signature Li Nanheng signed, whether it was Chinese or English, it was very beautiful. What are you looking at? Li Nanheng hung up the phone and came back. When he entered the study, he saw that Feng Ling was flipping through those documents. Feng Ling put down the documents and turned back to look at the man in home clothes. I just glanced at them casually. There shouldn't be a problem, right? She didn't see any secrets that she couldn't see, so her expression was very calm. It's nothing, but what were you looking at so seriously just now? When the man approached, Feng Ling momentarily forgot to avoid him. When she was enveloped by the man's aura, and when he suddenly leaned forward, she abruptly staggered backward and leaned against the edge of the table. She rushed to support herself with her hands on the edge of the table and tried her best to move backward to avoid the man's approaching face. Seeing that she was avoiding him, Li Nanheng didn't say much, but he didn't let her go either. He casually put his hands on both sides of her body, as if inadvertently pressing them against her hands, and lowered his eyes to look at her carefully, avoiding him. Seeing that she really couldn't avoid him, Feng Ling looked away and said, No, I didn't see anything. I just saw that your handwriting is very beautiful, boss. Li Nanheng lowered his head to look at the documents in her hand. Really? She dragged out her last syllable because of this posture. I just suddenly remembered that, boss. You entered the base when you were young. Did you also learn your cultural classes in the base? Li Nanheng looked at her. But you don't know anything about what I've learned and experienced. Do you want to find out? Feng Ling pursed her lips. No. Do you think I've been living in the base since I was a child and have no culture? The man seemed to let out a laugh from his nose. It was very deep, but strangely, it made her heart tremble a few times. I didn't say that. As Feng Ling explained, she raised her hand to push him away. However, the moment her hand left the table, the man took advantage of her loss of support to lower his head. She was startled and rushed to dodge, but she was still kissed on the lips by the man. One kiss was not enough. When she glared at him angrily, his thin lips curved slightly and he leaned down to kiss her again. When he kissed Feng Ling from leaning against the table to sitting on the table, the man finally restrained his desire. He raised his hand to hold her chin and looked directly at her misty and watery eyes. Seeing that she was already used to being kissed and was no longer so obviously at a loss, he smiled slightly and said hoarsely, "Although I spent a lot of time in the base, the Li family still had to be handed over to me. Even if I didn't want to learn, the elders wouldn't let me go. At the age of 17, I was forced to obtain a double degree in business administration and finance from Stanford. As for why I never told you, it was because the base didn't need these things. Every day, I brandished a gun and a stick. There was no need to show off these things in front of you, but I really didn't expect you to always treat me as illiterate." Feng Ling, I didn't do. As soon as she spoke, she was abruptly kissed by the man again. These two kisses were not as fierce and almost crazy as before. Instead, they were so warm that she almost forgot to resist. She just stiffly allowed him to hold her. It was not until the man opened her teeth and the tip of their tongues intertwined that she suddenly came back to herself. However, at this time, even if she wanted to retreat, she couldn't because she was already sitting on the desk. The man held her like this, holding her chin with his hand, not giving her any room to escape. After kissing for a while, when Feng Ling completely gave up struggling, she remained motionless and allowed him to kiss her. However, because of her docile appearance, the man almost couldn't restrain himself. After slightly panting against her lips, he tilted his head and smiled, then glanced at the bowl of noodles she had placed on the table. "What, you know how to cook?" "Feng Ling, I just cooked a bowl of noodles. I don't know if it's delicious. And I'm not picky. It's fine as long as it's cooked." Feng Ling, Li Nanhing still had things to do. He had just received a call, and Feng Ling finally took the opportunity to escape from the study. Otherwise, she felt that she might have been touched by him on the table in the study. After returning to the room, she lay on the bed. After lying down for a while, she sat up again. This repeated for a long time. Suddenly, she got up and went straight into the bathroom. When taking a shower, she turned the dressing mirror facing the bathroom door to face herself standing under the shower. In the mirror, the young woman's figure was slender, perfect, and white and tender. In the past, Feng Ling didn't have any concept of this, but recently, she often went out and saw many girls. Although she didn't pay special attention, she found that even though she trained in the wind and sun every day, her skin seemed to be much better than theirs. Especially her body, which was often covered in clothes like this, not showing at all. It was even more white and tender as though it could be broken with a pinch. Man or woman? As a woman, she couldn't continue to stay in the base. Even if she had savings in her card and such an apartment downstairs under her name, even if she left the base, she wouldn't starve to death and could still live a good life. But she knew that she didn't want to leave the base. For no reason, she just didn't want to leave. But was she going to continue pretending to be a man like this? She recalled the lingering and pitiful kiss in the study. She didn't know if it was because of herself or because of the water flowing out of the shower, but her face became hotter and hotter. Feng Ling took a long shower and stood under the water for a long time. The sound of the water splashing did not pay much attention to the movements outside. By the time she sensed someone approaching from outside the bathroom door had already been pulled open. Chapter 957. Feng Ling subconsciously raised her head. She didn't even have time to prepare herself before she saw the man's hand reach into the bathroom door. The girl stood naked in the water. She froze and didn't dare to move. In despair, she found that there was no place to hide. Just when Feng Ling was ready to be exposed, the man put a few new toiletries on the marble table in the bathroom. He didn't come in but said outside, "These are new. Use them if you like the smell. Put the old ones away or throw them away." With that, the man retracted his hand and closed the door. In less than a minute, he left just like that. From beginning to end, the man only came in with one arm. He didn't come in, nor did he stick his head in other words, he didn't find out? Feng Ling stood by the water and looked at the new bottles of toiletries. She was stunned for a long time before she slowly recovered and turned to look at the bathroom door that was closed again. When she woke up the next morning, Feng Ling felt the man's arm around her waist before she opened her eyes. It wasn't the first time she had woken up in his arms like this. This time, she wasn't as shocked as before, but she still stiffened slightly. However, the man tightened his grip around her waist. He patted her back gently as though he was comforting her or coaxing her to sleep. Feng Ling didn't move but looked out of the corner of her eyes at the sky outside the window. It was probably 9 o'clock now. If she didn't return to the base soon, she would be completely disrupted by this idle life. In the future, if she wanted to get up early on time, she would have to adjust for a long time. Being held in the man's arms and sleeping for a while, Feng Ling really couldn't fall asleep, so she pushed his hand away and got up. Li Nanheng opened his eyes. The Li family and the military have discussed the punishment measures. Do you want to listen? As soon as Feng Ling's feet touched the ground, she paused and looked back at him. What kind of punishment? Li Nanheng glanced at her, sat up on the bed, raised his hand, and casually tugged at his short hair. Seeing that his hair was slightly messy on the pillow, he knew that he slept well at her place last night. There's a world-famous snake valley in Cambodia. All kinds of ferocious and rare pythons and poisonous snakes live there all year round. Cambodian locals and snake trainers don't dare to approach it easily, but there's a minefield that was buried decades ago. You should know how the U.S. treats these small and medium-sized countries. They plan to build a base for the U.S. military nearby, but they need someone to clear the mines around the Snake Valley first. This is the mission I'm going to take? Feng Ling did not even frown. She stood by the bed and looked at him. Li Nanheng sat on the bed and looked at her indifferently. Whether it's clearing the mines or dealing with the snakes that may jump out at will, as long as you are not careful, you will either be buried in the Snake Valley or blown up above the minefield. This is the biggest concession the military can make, and the people of the United Nations have also agreed to this decision, but everyone knows that this is equivalent to letting you die in another way. Feng Ling looked very calm. Then I'll be careful. If I can come back alive, I'll come back alive. If I can't come back alive, at least I've lived for so many days. It's not a loss. Li Nanheng raised his eyebrows because of her calm and fearless expression. Can't you beg me? I can't beg, Feng Ling said calmly. I know that if I beg you now, you will find a way not to let me go to that kind of place. But now that the people in charge of the military and the United Nations have agreed to this decision, there is no need for you to intervene in this matter, boss. That day, the Li elders expressed their attitude very clearly. They don't want you to be stained with blood in this matter, and I think the same as them. Boss, you have done enough for me. It is an indisputable fact that I killed the military commander. This is like a murderer who has already been in prison, but you always try to help me avoid the punishment. In fact, this result is also very good. As long as I am careful and can come back alive, the whole thing can be completely over. Li Nanheng narrowed his eyes because of her words. Stained with blood? Feng Ling, from the beginning to now, what I've expressed is that I'm very willing. Your willingness doesn't mean that I'm willing. Boss, thank you for these days. I'll take the task of clearing the mines in Cambodia. Feng Ling was calm. When do they want me to leave? I'll go back to the base to pack up and prepare. Seeing that she began to be stubborn again, Li Nanheng's eyes suddenly became colder. Are you sure you want to go? I'm sure. The chance of coming back alive is very small. It doesn't matter. I have lived in the jungle since I was a child. I know all the snakes, insects, birds, and land animals very well. Others only have a 20% chance of surviving, but I will definitely have a 20% chance of surviving. Li Nanheng looked at her firm eyes, and after a moment of silence, he said indifferently, the base will send one more person to accompany you, but only one person. Who do you want to call to go with you? No, I'll go by myself. It's my own punishment mission. I don't need to implicate anyone. Looking at her expression, Li Nanheng didn't speak anymore but just looked at her. Feng Ling also looked at him. There was no fear in her eyes. She was so calm as if she was not facing the world-famous terrifying Snake Valley but just an ordinary shooting range. She knew that as long as she said one more word to Li Nanheng, even if it was not a request, even if it was just a sentence, saying that she didn't want to go, he would definitely find a way to let her stay, let her return to the base, and let her continue her peaceful life in the base. But she couldn't do this. Thousands of pairs of eyes in the base were watching, including the military, the United Nations, and the elders of the Li family. Boss Li had done too much for her. Now if she continued to let him help her, in the end, he would be completely implicated by her. Not only would his reputation be affected by those rumors, but the Li family would also put pressure on him. The relationship between him and the elders of the Li family had always been on the point of balance. If he was oppressed or negotiated various conditions because of her, she would really be in big trouble. She didn't think there was anything wrong with her killing. No one was wrong. Chapter 958. 11 Base. That night, Feng Ling returned to the base. She did not greet anyone, nor did she look for anyone to say a word. She only packed her things, various uniforms and bulletproof vests, and left with her suitcase. She did not disturb anyone. Li Nanheng's car was outside. Seeing that he didn't go back to rest after returning to the base, Feng Ling stood outside the car and glanced at him, saying, "Boss, I'll go to the airport by myself. You don't have to send me." Li Nanheng casually put his arm outside the car window, took a look at her, withdrew his gaze, and said coldly, "Well, be careful. Have a nice trip." Since she decided to go to Cambodia, Li Nanheng hadn't said a word to persuade her to stay. Obviously, he had been familiar with her temper. Since she had made up her mind, she wouldn't go back on her words no matter what he said. Feng Ling nodded and said no more. She turned to the parking lot inside the base on the other side, drove an off-road vehicle, and left the base. Over 11 Base, the moon was bright and the stars were sparse. A car was parked in place, and the other car quickly drove out. 4 days later. Cambodia, Siem Reap. This was the third day since Feng Ling arrived in Cambodia alone. Although she had the topographic map and the regional structure map of the Snake Valley handed over by the U.S. military, these maps were many years old, and many places were not clearly marked. It took her 3 days to familiarize herself with the nearby area. When she was on the plane, she hurriedly learned some simple Cambodian Khmer language from her mobile phone. She used her mobile phone to translate and learn about the situation here from the residents of the nearby villages. Although there was a minefield with many years of history nearby, because no one dared to walk here, the minefield had not exploded, and the mines buried below were very dense and very dangerous. But the more dangerous thing was the Snake Valley below, which was inhabited by various snakes all year round, which was very terrible. In order to avoid snakes, the villagers in the nearby villages habitually smeared all kinds of realgar powder and snake-repellent powder on their bodies from the moment they were born. Otherwise, they might be bitten by poisonous snakes at any time when they were farming in the nearby fields. After a long time, the snakes didn't run into the village and only wandered around the Snake Valley. No one was willing to go there. It was said that the Snake Valley was at the top of the mountain in front of them. Feng Ling picked up the map the military gave her and glanced at it. The location the military wanted to make use of was the mountain in front of them. It was suitable for hiding and also suitable for making a temporary small military reserve base. Sure enough, he had given her a mission that she might not be able to return from. From the description of the residents, it seemed that as long as she went up that mountain, she would definitely not be able to come back alive. After leaving the village, she prepared everything and went up the mountain. The members of 11 Base had all received demoning training, so every step they took, they would carry a special demoning device in front of them, and every step they took was carefully taken. After spending a day and a night, they only cleared an area near the jungle on the top of the mountain. After making sure that there were no mines within 100 meters, Feng Ling went down the mountain, carried her tent up, and set up camp on the mountainside. There was still a lot of snake-repellent powder in her suitcase that the villagers gave her. She scattered some around the tent and lay down in the tent to sleep. The temperature in Cambodia was so hot all year round. She only wore a thin t-shirt under her summer uniform. Lying in the tent like this, it was still very hot, but she would occasionally hear various very subtle movements coming from the direction of the jungle. If it were others, they might not know what the sound was. But she could hear it. It was some small beasts walking in the jungle at night. They came out to look for food. There were also some snakes crawling nearby, making very, very soft sounds. Feng Ling closed her eyes and suddenly felt as if she had returned to the age of 5, when she was a frightened and ignorant little girl, squatting in the cave every day. Because she didn't like to eat the meat brought back by the female wolf, she was so hungry that she ran out, climbed one tree after another, and picked fruit to eat. After another whole night, the demoning task continued. She was ready to live here alone for at least 4 or 5 months or even longer to clear mines on such a large mountain alone. She was wearing a pair of black military leather boots. With every step she took, she could feel that there were snakes nearby in the grass, which seemed to be disturbed and quickly crawled away. Feng Ling lowered her head to clear mines without changing her eyes, ignoring the various, small animals around her. Life on the mountain went on day after day, and there was no one here. Feng Ling didn't want to keep in touch with anyone in the base at this stage, so she didn't even charge her cell phone and just put it in her pocket. However, there was a fully charged power bank in her suitcase. If she had to use her cell phone one day, she could plug it in and use it. But it was only temporary. At this stage, she was in the stage of receiving punishment. She just wanted to do things here quietly. She was not particularly greedy for those modern communication and entertainment devices like TVs and mobile phones. Because she had lived in the jungle when she was a child, she didn't feel bored. Occasionally, she would go down the mountain to buy a few bottles of water, and occasionally go to those cars to buy spare things, and occasionally buy some food. If it weren't for the fact that most of the snakes near the Snake Valley were poisonous, she would probably be able to barbecue snake meat here. On the 15th day in Cambodia, before she came to the base, the people in the hall said that she should keep in touch with the base, at least once every half a month, to report the demoning situation to the base. So after eating something in the evening, Feng Ling got into the tent, lay inside, plugged her cell phone into the power bank, and then checked the nearby network. The communication network of the mobile phone was good enough, but it was not as full as in the urban area. At least she could send some messages slowly. Just a few minutes after she turned on her cell phone, a lot of missed calls and messages popped up on her cell phone. It took a long time for her to calm down. She read the messages one by one. Many people had called her and sent her messages. Almost all of the people who were close to her in the base had called her. Because they couldn't get in touch with her, they sent her messages asking her why she went to Cambodia. They were all words of concern and worry. Feng Ling didn't expect that she could gain so many sincere friends in 11 base. She smiled slightly, but because there were too many messages, she didn't reply. When she turned to the top, she saw that just 2 days ago, Li Nanheng sent her a message. Turn it on. Chapter 959. Seeing these 2 words, Feng Ling's hand paused. She scrolled down and found that Li Nanheng had only sent her this text message 2 days ago, which was very close to now. She scrolled through the call records again. There was no call from him in the past few days, but 2 days ago he called her more than a dozen times in a row and finally sent this text message. This seemed to be different from other people who called to ask about her situation. What's the matter? Feng Ling thought about it and replied to him, Boss? After replying, the phone remained silent and there was no reply. Feng Ling held the phone and stared at the screen for a long time until suddenly there was a beep. She paused and saw the built-in GPS navigation on the phone lit up. She was surprised. Wasn't this device only activated when the base was looking for missing base members? Every member of the base would have this device installed on their mobile phones, but now it suddenly lit up. Who was looking for her? And from this red light, the mobile phone that was activated now was not in Los Angeles, but in Cambodia. Who was in Cambodia? Who was looking for her? Feng Ling looked at the phone in doubt, sat up in the tent, thought about it, and got up to look out of the tent. The mountain was still dark, far away from the lights of the urban area, far away from everything, quiet, dark, as if incompatible with this world. There was no movement or trace. Was it because the base was afraid that she would be too slow to clear the mines here alone, so they sent someone to accompany her? Feng Ling hesitated for a while, returned to the tent, and called the base hall. The people in the base hall only said that someone from the base had indeed gone there, but they didn't know who was sent there by Boss Li. Boss didn't inform them, so they didn't know for the time being. As soon as she heard that it was arranged by Li Nanheng, Feng Ling suddenly worried that he might have called Kay over, because Kay was the closest to her in the base, but Kay was now receiving intensive sniper training, and he couldn't delay the training just to accompany her. Feng Ling simply sent a message to Li Nanheng, "Boss?" After sending it, there was still no response for a long time. Perhaps after being together for so long, they had a tacit understanding, such as Li Nanheng's temperament. Something must have happened for him to suddenly make so many calls in one day. Just as Feng Ling was feeling puzzled, her phone beeped with a message. She looked down. Li Nanheng, "Be careful." Feng Ling, "Nearby? What happened?" Before Li Nanheng replied, he suddenly received a call from Xiao Fei. "Feng Ling, we finally found your phone signal. The military doesn't plan on letting you go. 2 days ago, we learned that they had already sent people to infiltrate you. They don't plan on letting you come back alive. You have to be careful. If necessary, go down the mountain first. Don't stay on the mountain. There may be many unexpected people and weapons lying in ambush there." Feng Ling's eyes turned cold and she immediately understood why Li Nanheng suddenly contacted her. "Then who are the local people in Cambodia now?" "I am now in Cambodia, and they still want to chase me across the border? From the beginning, they didn't intend to let you go because they are in the wrong. As long as you live, it will be a direct irony to them. It's useless to sacrifice a commander and Daniken. Only when you die can the whole thing come to an end." Feng Ling was silent for a moment. "I see. Boss was already aware of the situation before we knew about it. He went to find you as soon as possible." Feng Ling was about to come out of the tent. After hearing this, she paused and her hand froze on the tent curtain for a while before she said, "All right, I see." After hanging up the phone, Feng Ling stood outside the tent, extinguished all the lights and flames, and then put all the guns and daggers that she could carry on her body into the hidden compartment of her clothes. If Boss Lee had arrived today, then the person who was searching for her with the equipment just now was him. He was in such a hurry and replied to her by text, which meant that he had approached the group of people who wanted to harm her and was now searching for her specific location, but could not contact her directly. Boss Lee might be hiding among those people now. A few hours later, dawn was coming. Feng Ling, who hadn't slept all night, sat in the tall grass closest to her tent and watched the tent standing quietly in front of her on the hillside. Suddenly her ears twitched. She heard a flash of lightning across the sky, and a bullet fired from a silencer broke through the air and hit the tent, leaving a black hole. Feng Ling watched this scene coldly and remained motionless in the grass. At the same time, she lowered her head to look at a snake that was 4 or 5 centimeters thick crawling past her. Although she was not afraid of snakes, because she couldn't move, she put her hands on the ground and the snake crawled over the back of her hands because she was motionless. The creepy coolness of the snake made her hair stand on end, and a chill ran down her spine. In the distance, because she hadn't heard any movement, footsteps had begun to come. From the faint rustling sound, there were at least 3 or 5 people within a distance of 300 meters. As several people appeared under a tree not far away, Feng Ling was about to raise her hand, but the snake slowly crawled over the back of her hand, and its tail was still there. She hesitated and didn't move, but then she looked at the head that appeared over there. It was such a good opportunity. If she didn't take action now, she was likely to be passive in the end, and then she could only wait for death in this place. Thinking of this, she maintained her original sitting posture and abruptly pulled her hand out from under the snake's tail. However, at that moment, the snake was alarmed. At the moment when it quickly crawled away, it suddenly turned back and stood up. At the moment when Feng Ling stood up, she felt a sharp pain in her shoulder and arm. She turned her eyes abruptly, only to see that the triangular-headed poisonous snake had turned back to bite her in such a terrible posture. This snake was obviously poisonous, and her heart skipped a beat. Without much time to think, She pulled the snake away, endured the numbness of half of her arm, raised the gun, and fired at the person who stuck his head out in that direction. Bang! Her gun was not silenced, but her marksmanship was superb. The person who had just stuck his head out from behind the tree was instantly shot in the head and fell to the ground. Feng Ling endured the pain and got up. She turned back and fired 2 shots at the snake that was about to crawl away. After shooting 3 inches and 7 inches, she kicked the dead snake back to her tent and quickly rushed in the direction of the tree, turning from passive to active, not giving the other party any chance. Chapter 960. However, the number of people who came was clearly more than what she heard. Just as Feng Ling quickly found 2 or 3 people, shot one of them in the head, and hid in the grass, several more people appeared on the other side, aiming their guns at her. Feng Ling quickly retreated. Right now, this group of people had already set up ambushes and assassinations. Her only chance of victory was that she was the only one who knew all the landmines nearby. With every step she took, she avoided the minefields on the ground. However, those people were obviously killers sent by the military directly from Cambodia. The people sent by the military did not show their faces in the dark. They were also very sharp, and they would remember where she went. The road extended all the way to the mountain. Because of the gunshots and the fast running back and forth, countless snakes were startled and scattered. Occasionally, some spotted snakes with flowers could be seen quickly crawling through the sparse grass. Feng Ling retreated all the way to a cliff above the snake valley. The cliff had just been cleared by her yesterday and she had scattered snake powder on it. Originally, she wanted to check the environment here, so she cleared the minefield on this road, but now she escaped here. She glanced at the dangerous cliff not far behind her, then turned back to look at the group of people chasing after her. The arm that had just been bitten by the snake had almost lost all feeling. She didn't know what kind of poison it was, but she felt that her body temperature was dropping bit by bit. She wanted to raise her gun, but she felt intense pain all over her body. Her head was also turning black. Hearing that the group of people had caught up to her, she closed her eyes and was about to take the risk to jump onto a tree to avoid the minefield on the other side. However, just as she was about to jump up, she suddenly staggered because of the pain in her chest and lungs. She half knelt on the ground. She couldn't tell how pale her face had become, and the color of her lips had also changed. There was even a light green tint in the whiteness. Every time she breathed, she felt as if there was a knife cutting her heart. Feng Ling closed her eyes, suspecting that even if she was not killed by these people, she would probably die of the snake venom soon. She staggered to her feet. Suddenly, she felt a cold stab on her back. She turned her eyes abruptly, only to see a sniper rifle aiming at her from a tree not far away. She was in a trance. Perhaps she had a hunch that she would die no matter which way she chose. Many people suddenly appeared in her mind. In her short life of less than 20 years, she had never seen her parents. She regarded the wolf as her mother, the base as her home, and Li Nanheng as the guide of her life. Until now. Was she going to be buried here in the end? The moment the sniper shot rang, there was the sound of wind whistling through the air at the same time. With a trace of white light, it whistled past Feng Ling's eyes. Feng Ling raised her blurry eyes. What was that just now? And a silencer? His marksmanship was superb, deflecting the bullet that was about to hit her body in midair with the force of another bullet. Hearing the sound of 2 bullets piercing through the tree trunk on the edge of the cliff, Feng Ling wanted to see clearly, but her legs softened and she suddenly fell backward. However, just when she thought she was about to fall to the ground, a figure pounced on her. When she found that her body had been paralyzed to the point where she could no longer resist, he took her into his arms and then fiercely held her in his arms. Her vision darkened and she could barely see who it was, but from the familiar male scent that suddenly poured into her nose, she could clearly tell that it was Li Nanheng. He still came. Since she was a child, she had never been the one who was protected by others. Even in 11 base, she had always been the one who rushed to the front. But it seemed that only Li Nanheng would pull her back from difficulties again, and only he had the ability to protect her behind him. Feng Ling couldn't open her eyes and only said weakly, "Boss? Be careful, Feng Ling, Li Nanheng hugged the girl in his arms tightly. When the other party was about to shoot again, he quickly carried her down into the tall grass. When he looked down and saw her face, he immediately frowned. He had expected her to be in trouble and be forced to the point where she couldn't resist, but he didn't expect her to be bitten by a snake. The people sent by the military were indeed more than Li Nanheng had imagined. Because this was a secret operation sent by the military, after the whole thing was solved on the surface, they couldn't have any conflicts on the surface. Otherwise, everything they had done before would be in vain. They couldn't drive a helicopter over and had to hide among these people all the way. Fortunately, Feng Ling reacted quickly and hid in the tent, but her face, Li Nanheng held her tightly in his arms, pressed his chin against her cheek, felt her cold body temperature, and whispered, "Hold on, don't sleep." Feng Ling opened her eyes again. She felt that she didn't need to close her eyes, but she just couldn't see clearly. Her lips were also extremely dry, but in order not to distract him, she still slightly pursed her pale and blue lips. Feng Ling felt that Li Nanheng carried her on his back and ran between the minefields on the cliff. She didn't know where they were running to. She could only feel the whistling in her ears and the body temperature of the man who carried her on his back, which was a warm stove under her gradually cold body temperature. She closed her eyes and felt that her limbs were in a state of numbness, but she had thought that she would be forced to jump into the snake valley and be buried in the belly of the abdomen snake. If she died in his arms, maybe that was not bad. Provided that he didn't get hurt because of her, and didn't die here. Li Nanheng. Feng Ling's mind was filled with phantoms, and her hand unconsciously gently grasped the clothes on his shoulder. Listening to the whistling in her ears, she said in a very low voice, "Thank you for coming to save me, thank you." Hearing the grateful tone in her voice as if she were saying her last words, Li Nanheng avoided the bullets and the minefields under his feet, held her on his back with one hand, and quickly dodged backward with the gun in the other hand. He took the time to look back and said coldly, "Shut up. After I die, just leave me here. Don't care about me. I told you to shut up." Feng Ling closed her eyes, suddenly grinned, pressed her head against his back, and said in a low voice, "Before I die, let me tell you a secret, okay?" Li Nanheng carried Feng Ling and jumped down a small hill near the cliff. In the eyes of those people, it looked like he jumped off the cliff. He quickly turned away in the grass and said coldly, "I don't want to hear it." Chapter 961. Feng Ling was a little aggrieved. It was rare for her to admit that she was a girl at this time. But he didn't want to hear it. She closed her eyes and did not speak. She could only feel the muscles on his back tense up and the strength in his body. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly. Regardless of whether he listened or not, she was not going to live. At the very least, before she died, she wanted to be a little girl in other people's eyes. "I'm actually a girl. What you have to do now is to open your eyes and keep awake. I don't want to hear it. Got it?" Li Nanheng suddenly interrupted her, his voice a little angry. Feng Ling's voice was choked in her throat. It was not that she didn't want to say it, but after being interrupted, she found that she was too dizzy to be conscious. She opened her mouth, but still weakly leaned her head on his back. Li Nanheng took advantage of the fact that the group of people dared not chase them because of the snake valley below and jumped down the mountain with Feng Ling on his back, avoiding the dangerous snake bones below, through the grass, and found a passage on the cliff near the mountain wall, but because there was a minefield under their feet, they couldn't jump over. Although the group of people who chased after them were pulled far away because of this negligence, they quickly reacted, found a path, and rushed over. If it weren't for the minefield, let alone one Feng Ling, even 3 Feng Lings could be easily taken away. But now there were landmines everywhere in this place. If they were not careful, they would be smashed into pieces and couldn't walk freely at all. More importantly, Feng Ling had entered a semi-conscious state. If they didn't stop to help her deal with the snake bite wound, the result would be unpredictable. Gunshots rang on the cliff. Feng Yin heard the gunshots, closed her eyes and frowned. Her only hand that could move was very numb. She tugged at his clothes with some difficulty and said hoarsely, "Li Nanheng, don't worry, it'll be fine." Even though the only way to survive was to jump into the snake valley, there was no other way to escape. Li Nanheng stood on the cliff, comforting Feng Ling while observing the height below. Before those people got close, he spent 2 minutes observing the height and distance below. Then, he saw a stone platform that was covered by dense leaves. Although he did not know whether it was sturdy or not, at least it could temporarily save his life. Feng Ling didn't know what Li Nanheng was planning. However, the moment she was carried by the man and fell off the cliff, she only heard the sound of the rushing wind and the feeling of weightlessness. Feng Ling, whose shoulder was injured, felt her ears ringing. Right now, she should have been unable to hear anything, but she could hear Li Nanheng's steady heartbeat. For some reason, the corners of Feng Ling's eyes suddenly became wet. She didn't want to implicate him, but he still came. The people above had already caught up with them, but because they had already jumped down, they hesitated and didn't notice what was in the dense bushes under the cliff. After a few glances, they looked at each other and then at each other. This is the Snake Valley. No one can walk out of it alive. Our mission has been completed. We also killed the person in charge of 11 base. It's really worth it. In order to avoid any mistakes, the people above stood on the cliff for a long time after they fell. After confirming that there was no movement below, Li Nanheng did not bring anyone up from other unknown channels. After standing guard for an hour, they left. After Feng Ling was brought down by Li Nanheng, the two of them had just landed on the stone wall. Although Li Nanheng's body was in the middle, Feng Ling, who was unconscious, fainted. Although this Snake Valley was not a bottomless abyss, the distance from the stone platform to the top of the cliff was at least a dozen floors high. It was covered by dense leaves and very hidden. Li Nanheng abruptly helped Feng Ling up. When they fell earlier because of the continuous falling speed, there were cracking sounds, and the speed of their bodies had been slowed down by the dense branches above. Except for their internal organs feeling as though they had been displaced due to the force of the fall, they were not affected at all. Li Nanheng's body was scratched by the trees. Feng Ling's injuries were less, but there were some shallow bloodstains on her cheek. In addition, she had been bitten by a snake before. It was hard to imagine that she could still hold on in less than half an hour. Now she fell down like this and fainted completely. Feng Ling, Li Nanheng looked at her face, looked at her with a dark look, and pressed her philtrum harder and harder. The unconscious girl in his arms faintly furrowed her brows. Her eyelids moved, but she seemed to be unable to open them. Her fingers that were hanging by her side also moved slightly. She tried hard to show that she was fine and that there was no need to worry, but she couldn't do it no matter what. Don't sleep, you can't sleep, Feng Ling, open your eyes. At the same time, Li Nanheng grabbed her hand and pressed it to the place between her thumb and index finger, stimulating her pain point. When Feng Ling frowned and opened her eyes slightly, he stared at her, looked at her, and held her tightly in his arms. Be good. Don't sleep. Once you fall asleep, you won't wake up, do you hear me? Feng Ling wanted to smile at him, but found that her lips were numb. Even when she spoke, her lips were so numb that she could barely move. She could only hear a vague voice coming from her half-opened lips. Boss, very, 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 very light 2 words, so light that it seemed as though they could be blown away by the wind. Don't speak. Save your strength. If you're tired, use your fingers. I'll find a way to keep you awake, okay? Li Nanheng said as he reached out to pull her close. Feng Ling leaned into his arms and did not struggle or move. She allowed him to untie her black uniform and then silently lifted her bitten arm. She was wearing a loose t-shirt with short sleeves. When he rolled up the sleeves, he could see the purple blisters on her shoulder. Blisters appeared around the purplish wound, and blood seeped out of the wound. Feng Ling's body turned from cold to feverish. She trembled uncontrollably and seemed to have a slight cramp. How long have you been bitten? The man asked in a deep voice as he checked her wound. I don't know. About a minute or 2 after they shot at my tent. Although Feng Ling's eyes were half open and she seemed to be unconscious, and her voice was so weak that he had to lean his ears close to her to hear her clearly, at least she was still trying to stay awake. Chapter 962. That's less than half an hour. Hearing this, Li Nanheng helped Feng Ling lean against the mountain wall, took off her coat, and found a sharp dagger in the interlayer of her coat. Feng Ling leaned against the wall weakly, panting heavily. She felt that her breathing was irregular, and she was in a daze. Hearing a sound, she opened her eyelids with some difficulty, only to see that Li Nanheng had casually grabbed a pile of fallen leaves and a thin branch that was easy to ignite. He lit a small fire with a lighter and placed the dagger on it to roast. She sat there motionlessly and could only see the man's movements. After roasting the dagger for a few minutes, Li Nanheng turned around, took the dagger, put his shoulder to her mouth, held her arm with one hand, and held the dagger with the other, saying indifferently, "Bite me if it hurts." Feng Ling looked up at him. "It's been half an hour. The poisonous blood has probably— Don't talk nonsense. Kill as many as you can. Save your life first." Li Nanheng warned, "Don't move." The next moment, Feng Ling's arm that had been numb to the point of numbness instantly felt a piercing pain. Without anesthesia, the pain of flesh being cut could be clearly felt. Although it was not to the extent of cutting her flesh, the dagger that had just been roasted by the fire for a long time to kill the bacteria directly cut across on her shoulder. In order to reduce her pain, Li Nanheng's hand moved very quickly. With 2 slashes, a perfect cross was formed, and then dark blood that was sticky because of the snake venom flowed out. At the same time, the man took off his belt and wrapped it around her shoulders. Then, he tightened it until the blood stopped flowing toward her heart. Feng Ling was in so much pain that a layer of sweat had appeared on her forehead, but she still bit her lips and refused to make any sound of pain, nor did she bite Li Nanheng's shoulder. While helping her squeeze out most of the poisonous blood, Li Nanheng looked back at her pained expression. "Endure it." Feng Ling nodded with sweat all over her forehead, closed her eyes, and let him continue. When the thick blood on the surface gradually became normal and the color was no longer as dark as when it was first squeezed out, Li Nanheng lowered his head and sucked it with his mouth. Feng Ling trembled all over and turned to look at the man who was sucking it with his mouth. She rushed to avoid him but did not have the strength. "Don't." She felt that the wound covered by the man's lips was even hotter and said hoarsely, "This won't do." Li Nanheng spat out a mouthful of dark blood and said indifferently, "My mouth is not injured. I'm fine." "Boss, you can't do this." However, no matter how she refused, Li Nanheng still did it. When he felt that it was enough, the blood was still flowing out. Li Nanheng glanced at his coat, unbuttoned it, and was about to take off his clothes. Feng Ling understood what he was going to do next and immediately said hoarsely, "Boss, do you need a cloth to tie it up to stop the bleeding?" "Yes." The man answered without hesitation and took off his clothes without hesitation. Seeing that he was about to tear off his clothes, Feng Ling hurriedly raised her hand and covered the back of his hand with some difficulty. "Well, I've coughed." "I have." As if understanding what she meant in an instant, Li Nanheng looked at her calmly and followed her words. "What?" Feng Ling looked at him, bit her pale lips, and then suddenly smiled in relief. She retracted her hand, slowly put it on the collar of her t-shirt, and then unbuttoned the front buttons one by one. Although it was a little difficult, she still did it slowly. Because of her action, Li Nanheng didn't move again. He just looked at her silently. After the clothes inside were completely unbuttoned, Feng Ling slowly opened the clothes, revealing the flat chest wrapping cloth inside. "Don't you want cloth?" "I have a lot." Li Nanheng stared at her face motionlessly and then at the chest wrapping cloth on her body. If they weren't in such an environment, perhaps he wouldn't be able to control all his feelings and emotions when he saw her suddenly being so honest. But at this moment, there was no chance for him to explode. There was only one purpose, that was, the snake venom in her body was very serious. She couldn't die. There was no smile or surprise in the man's eyes. He just said lightly, "What is this?" Feng Ling took a deep breath with some difficulty and said, "Yes, a lot of cloth." Li Nanheng glanced at the blood still flowing on her arm and said hoarsely, "I'm asking you, what is this?" Feng Ling stared at him, her eyes frank and fearless. "This is my secret." "Your secret?" "The secret is that you are actually a woman." Li Nanheng's expression didn't change at all. She couldn't tell whether he just knew it at this moment or had known it a long time ago. Feng Ling couldn't see through him, so she didn't explain much. She just raised her hand to pull off the chest wrapping cloth and said softly, "Anyway, it's impossible for me to return to the base alive. So what if I'm a man or a woman? I have to be honest for once before I die." "Didn't you say I was not honest enough?" Feng Ling looked at him, her eyes full of relief. "I'm honest now." Seeing that she was about to untie the cloth, Li Nanheng reached out to hold her hand, and then buttoned her shirt one by one expressionlessly. At the same time, he took off his own clothes, tore them into strips, and quickly tied them to the wound on her shoulder. Seeing that the man didn't speak but didn't stop, Feng Ling looked at him blankly. Seeing that his face was so dark, she couldn't help saying hoarsely, "Boss, are you angry that I hid it from you for so long?" Li Nanheng didn't speak but tightened his grip on the cloth on her shoulder. "I'm sorry." Her voice was low and weak, as if it could be blown away by the wind. "If it weren't for the fact that I can't live, I don't know how long I will pretend to be a man, but now," she suddenly grinned. "It's also a kind of happiness to die by boss's side." "Don't speak. You're very noisy now." Li Nanheng looked irritated, picked up another piece of cloth and continued to help her wrap it up. However, Feng Ling's head was heavy and she felt that her consciousness was dissipating. Her voice was also weak, and her eyes were empty as she whispered, "Boss, thank you for liking me. You let me spend most of my limited life and limited happiness with you. I will die without regrets, asking for monthly votes." Chapter 963. Feng Ling did not move and allowed him to kiss her fiercely. However, even though he was angry and even carried a trace of fear that she could not detect, even though the kiss was fierce, he remembered that he had just sucked the poisonous blood from her wound, so no matter how hard he did not bite their lips. However, just this strength was enough for Feng Ling to feel the anger in his emotions. She leaned weakly in his arms and allowed him to kiss her like this. After the kiss, Li Nanheng lowered his eyes to look at her eyes that were about to lose focus. He held her shoulders and said sternly, "Don't sleep." Feng Ling tried to open her eyes and look at him. Her pale lips didn't show any sign of redness because of his kiss but were still white with a hint of blue. "Be obedient. Don't sleep." Li Nanheng could see that she was trying to hold on, so he held her shoulder tightly. "If you can't hold on, tell me. Don't close your eyes quietly. Don't sleep." Feng Ling responded in a low voice and leaned back against the mountain wall with the help of the man. She thought that once the secret that she was a woman was known by Boss Li, she might face his anger or punishment, or even be driven out of the base. Even she didn't expect that she would be in such an environment. It seemed that at this time, he really didn't have the mood to be surprised. That was good. At the very least, she managed to escape his wrath. After all, she had deceived the entire base for so long. Feng Ling lowered her head and thought to herself, but Li Nanheng checked all the wounds on her body and confirmed that there was no problem except for the shoulder that was bitten by a poisonous snake. Li Nanheng took out his cell phone and glanced at it. There was no signal. Then he glanced at Feng Ling and took out her cell phone from her pocket. There was also no signal. 100 meters below the cliff was the center of the Snake Valley. They couldn't jump down from here. The snakes that occasionally crawled up and down the mountain were extremely fierce, and the Snake Valley was the place where snakes lived in groups in Cambodia. Looking up, there was a forest of green trees on and off the cliff. Because the sky had just lit up, most of the leaves were with the smell of morning dew and grass, and the dry branches that Li Nanheng picked up on this stone platform were only a few. Everything around was very quiet, except for some occasional rustling sounds. Even if they didn't listen carefully, they knew what it was. From the speed of the sound, they could almost tell how long the snake was crawling on the cliff. In this silence, Feng Ling held on for a long time. If it weren't for her good physical quality, she would have been dead long ago. But no matter how weak she was just a human being. That kind of poisonous snake was obviously very poisonous. If she couldn't be sent to the hospital immediately, she would definitely die in 1 or 2 days, or even in a few hours. There were dense forests and minefields all over the mountain, and there was no living person. Occasionally, there was the sound of snakes crawling nearby, which made Feng Ling instinctively more careful. After a long time, Feng Ling couldn't hold on anymore. She closed her eyes for 2 minutes while Li Nanheng got up and looked for a way to climb up the mountain. However, in these 2 minutes, many strange images appeared in her mind. In the dark night, the endless sea, the cold air, and the 1-year-old girl who was washed to the shore, crying helplessly. She walked on the shore with her short legs that had just learned to walk, crying as she walked. When she fell, she would climb up and continue crying. She cried until she was tired, until she was hungry, until she wanted milk, food, water, and her mother. However, there was nothing. There was only the shore near the jungle and the endless sea in the distance. Feng Ling opened her eyes in a great pain. Perhaps because of the influence of those very young memories, she didn't know whether it was a blurry memory of when she was 1 year old or something else. When could a person's earliest memory be traced back? It was definitely impossible when she was a baby, but the memory of when she was 1 year old, although blurry, at least it really belonged to her. Seaside? Why was it the seaside? Perhaps it was Li Nanheng's angry and worried gaze that woke her up. She looked up at him and whispered, "Boss, didn't I tell you not to sleep?" The man knew that she couldn't hold on anymore, but he still pressed his hand on her. "Don't sleep." Feng Ling looked at him, smiled, and said softly, "This mountain wall can't be climbed up, right?" Li Nanheng's eyes darkened. "It's all right. I'll take you out as soon as possible." No matter how powerful Li Nanheng was, it was impossible for him to fight against such a harsh natural environment. She had been clearing mines here and walking back and forth for so many days, so she was already very familiar with the terrain and environment here. Because no one dared to approach this mountain, and there were too many snakes crawling back and forth all year round, the grass, ground, and stones were covered with moss and other things similar to moss. This place was very steep, and the mountain wall was very slippery, so it was impossible to climb up. At this time, Li Nanheng picked up the daggers carried by the two of them, got up, and cut off all the strong vines around the stone platform. With sharp eyes and nimble hands, when a snake climbed down dangerously toward him, he nimbly raised his hand, and the blade slid hard on the snake's vital point. In an instant, a green snake with a triangular head fell down softly, and Li Nanheng kicked it off the stone platform. Watching the man throw the thick vines in front of her, Feng Ling frowned. She really wanted to say that there was no need to be so troublesome. If he was alone, it might be easier to find a way to leave, but if he wanted to take her away with him, who was currently weak, it would be even more difficult. However, there was one thing she was very sure of. Even if there was no signal on their phones, fortunately, their phones were cut off at this position, and if they never recovered, 11 Base would definitely notice and come to rescue them as soon as possible. She just didn't know if she could hold on when they came. She wanted to speak, but she saw that Li Nanheng had cut off the parts of the broken vines that would stab his hand and then threw them to her hand. Feng Ling suddenly frowned because she saw that when Li Nanheng's back was facing her, she saw a faint blood stain on the back of his black uniform. Right now, her sense of smell was almost numb. Earlier, she didn't smell any blood, but now she remembered. "Li Nanheng, do you want me to kill you?" Chapter 964. Seeing that Li Nanheng's face was also a little pale, Feng Ling's eyes flashed coldly. Earlier, when he was carrying her to avoid those people, she seemed to have heard the sound of a gunshot. However, the bullet did not brush past her ear. She seemed to have heard the sound of a bullet entering flesh. It was very close. But at that time, she was not clear-headed enough. She looked at Li Nanheng's back again, frowned, and whispered, "Boss." Hearing her voice, Li Nanheng turned back to look at her. Thinking that she was uncomfortable, he bent down. "Where does it hurt? Bear with it a little longer, okay?" When the man bent down, Feng Ling deliberately paid attention to his movements. Not only did she see that when he bent down, his movements were a little slow, but his shoulders did not move much. Also, the strong smell of blood instantly rushed into her nose, and the front of the man seemed to be a little wet from the blood. He was dressed in black, so she didn't pay much attention to him when she was unconscious. She recalled that the moment she jumped off the cliff, Li Nanheng's hand had been holding her steadily and did not let her fall. Even when they landed on the stone platform, he used his body to cushion her. He was clearly injured, and it was very likely that the bullet was still in the flesh behind his shoulder, but he did not say a word. Feng Ling could not speak but just looked at him. The man also lowered his head to meet her eyes, and his eyes as deep as the sea looked at her increasingly pale face. "Don't be afraid. We will all be fine," the man saw through her thoughts and whispered. Feng Ling slightly curved her lips. "Boss, did I drag you down? At that time, you said that if I didn't want to come, as long as I asked, you would definitely help me, but I still came stubbornly. In the end, I didn't expect that the military had already planned this and did not intend to let me go back alive. If I had known this, I would not have come, or I would not have let you find me, and I would have died quietly." Li Nanheng's eyes turned cold. "Not to mention death, even if you turn into ashes, I can still find you." Feng Ling looked at him and immediately smiled. However, her eyes were in a trance and she could not see his face clearly. Just as she was about to close her eyes, she heard the man shout, "Open your eyes." She frowned and forced herself to open her eyes to look at him. How fierce! Since he wasn't allowed to sleep, he would find something to distract himself with. Feng Ling closed her eyes and then opened them. She took a deep breath and said, "I don't think I have anything left to be remembered by others. I know the condo you bought for me wasn't bought with my money. Let's transfer it to your name," and she slowly raised her hand and placed it between her chest and neck. "I almost forgot. For the sake of convenience, I didn't bring it with me. For as long as I can remember, there is a small jade pendant tied with a red string around my neck. It is engraved with the word, Feng. If I really don't have anything worth leaving to be remembered, bury the jade pendant and the clothes I used to wear. Make it a cenotaph for me. The jade pendant is in my suitcase. There is a very small interlayer in it, which is... Speaking of which, as long as you want to find your biological parents, you can find them with this jade pendant. These things have to be done by yourself, and no one else can do it for you. So, the most important thing is to survive. Don't talk nonsense with me about dying." Li Nanheng's face was cold. "Either go back alive or die here. No one will have the leisure to build a cenotaph for you, and no one will commemorate a dead person with such a low sense of existence. So survival is the most important thing. Death is not worth it at all, understand?" Feng Ling smiled, but her smile did not reach her eyes. "I don't want to find my parents. Whether I live or die is my own business. I don't need any so-called parents or relatives to be sad for me, nor do I need anyone to worry about me." "Really? Don't you care about me?" The man's voice suddenly became a little cold. Feng Ling paused and then looked at him again. After watching for a moment, she suddenly asked in a low voice, "Why are you not surprised that I am a woman dressed as a man? Not angry? Do you think it's the time to be surprised?" Li Nanheng knew that she wanted to keep awake by talking, so he patiently talked to her and fixed the rattan around her waist. Feng Ling looked at him blankly and said in a low voice, "Then if it's not in this situation, if it's any other time or in the base, if you really find out that I am actually a girl, what will you do? What will I do?" Li Nanheng snorted coldly, glanced at her coldly, and then tied the rattan tightly around her waist. He strangled her until her eyes were slightly surprised. After confirming that it was strong enough, he let go and said indifferently, "Live well now, go back to get rid of the snake venom, and become healthy again. I will let you know exactly what I want to do to you." Even in such an environment, Feng Ling could feel her ears heating up when she heard these words that were clearly full of threats to keep her awake. Later on, she had been looking for all kinds of topics to talk about in an attempt to keep herself awake. However, Feng Ling persisted, and persisted. Half an hour later, when Li Nanheng was about to tie the vines around her waist, she completely lost consciousness. Her head fell forward and fell into the man's arms. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't wake him up. The mountain wall was very slippery. Li Nanheng used 2 daggers to poke a new hole in all the places on the mountain wall that could be climbed. At least there was no moss in such a hole, so he wouldn't slip when he climbed up. But this was a very time-consuming project. Li Nanheng avoided the snakes crawling around, picked Feng Ling up from the stone platform, tied the rattan around their waists, and climbed up with her. It wasn't easy for him to climb up a little, but because of the snakes crawling by and trying to bite Feng Ling, he quickly dodged down. She couldn't be bitten by any snake, even a non-venomous snake, or she would definitely die. The power of nature could not be underestimated. This repeated until the afternoon. In the morning, the base hall noticed that his and Feng Ling's cell phone signal and GPS location disappeared at the same time. Later, the base quickly sent several helicopters over. At the fastest speed, it would take at least 7 or 8 hours to reach the top of the mountain. It was already 3 or 4 in the afternoon when they arrived at the top of the mountain. Because there was a minefield on the mountain, they could not land at will for the time being. Otherwise, it was likely to cause an explosion, and the entire mountain and the people in the mountain, including the rescue team members in the helicopter, would be buried in the sea of fire. Chapter 965. But after detection, they found that at least half of the positions on this road had been cleared with mines. Feng Ling was alone. In just half a month, she had actually cleared so many mines. This speed and seriousness were really amazing. Even if she came here to be punished, she was still so calm and didn't deal with it at all. It was because the nearby minefields were cleared by Feng Ling that the helicopter landed faster than expected. Then, with the professional GPS search technology of the base, they found the cliff at the top of the mountain and saw the faint flickering light of the flashlight below. When Feng Ling was carried into the helicopter, Han Jin and Xiao Su, who came to rescue with him, saw Li Nanheng's slightly pale face in the dark and immediately noticed something was wrong. "Boss, are you also injured?" "It's okay. Say Feng Ling first." Speaking of this, he suddenly remembered that the number of bullets in the gun on Feng Ling's body was not right. Before boarding the helicopter, he looked back at the place where Feng Ling had pitched the tent halfway up the mountain. "Wait for me." Han Jin and Xiao Su didn't say much. One immediately went into the helicopter to check Feng Ling's injury and condition, and the other followed Boss Li to the tent. Stepping through the dense grass, they walked to the tent and saw that the luggage brought by Feng Ling was piled up inside. Xiao Su went in and put away the suitcase and all the things in a minute. Then he walked out of the tent, only to see Boss Li looking for something with the flashlight on his cell phone. "Boss? Is there anything left?" "Looking for snakes," Li Nanheng said concisely. Xiao Su was puzzled. He wanted to say that there were so many snakes on the mountain. Just now, from the helicopter landing to here, he heard the sound of snakes escaping everywhere. Why was he still looking for snakes? Just as Xiao Su approached, Li Nanheng suddenly narrowed his eyes coldly. "Stop, don't move." Xiao Su's footsteps froze in an instant. Then he saw Li Nanheng suddenly bend down in his direction. The corner of Xiao Su's mouth twitched, and he immediately said in horror, "Boss, although we know you care about Feng Ling, we are also very worried about him now. You don't have to bow to me." Before he finished speaking, he saw a dead black and green snake being picked up by Li Nanheng with a wooden stick. The snake's 3-inch and 7-inch body had been pierced by bullets. It looked like it had been dead for more than a few hours. Even a man who had never been afraid of snakes was shocked when he saw this scene. Xiao Su's eyes widened and he took a step back. "What is this?" Seeing this dead snake, Li Nanheng smiled and threw the snake into Xiao Su's arms. When Xiao Su screamed in fright and didn't know whether to hold it or throw it away, he said indifferently, "Take it back. Feng Ling's life still depends on it." Xiao Su had goosebumps all over his body from the cold and disgusting thing in his hand. He only calmed down after hearing this. Yes, after being bitten by a snake, he had to be injected with a serum. If he could find out what kind of snake had bitten him, that would be even better. He could only bring this snake back to save his life. And from the way the snake died and the marksmanship, it was indeed killed by Feng Ling. In other words, she was bitten by this snake. On the helicopter, Feng Ling had been unconscious and unconscious. In fact, she had not woken up since she fainted a few hours ago. Her body was sometimes cold and sometimes hot, and now she was as cold as a dead person. Doctor Wen in the base had recently gone to the UK for a seminar and couldn't come back. The doctor who came with him was the substitute doctor in the base and Dr. Wen's apprentice. He rushed forward to treat Feng Ling. When he was about to untie her clothes, Li Nanheng said coldly, "Let me do it." With that, the man endured the pain in his shoulder and picked up the dagger again. Without giving the doctor a chance to take off her coat, he directly cut off the sleeve on her entire arm, revealing her entire arm and the purplish wound on her shoulder. "Boss, are you also injured?" Xiao Su asked. "It's just a minor injury." "I'm fine," Li Nanheng said indifferently. "Let's find a way to save her first. The snake venom is not as easy to treat as the wound. We have to do it as soon as possible." The doctor nodded, checked Feng Ling's wound, and said, "Boss Li, it seems that you have given Feng Ling a preliminary detoxification treatment. Although this method can't eliminate the root of the venom, from the color of the scab, at least more than half of the snake venom has not been absorbed. It is not clear how serious the venom of this snake is. We must take the injured and the snake to the hospital. The only thing I can do here is to bandage and deal with the wound. The blood in her wound has temporarily coagulated. Let me bandage it for you first. I asked you to save her, so save her. Don't talk so much nonsense." Li Nanheng's face suddenly turned cold. "How many hours will it take to fly back to Los Angeles from here? Do you think she is still alive?" As soon as the doctor saw Li Nanheng's angry look, his face immediately turned pale. But in the current situation, there is no way to do follow-up treatment and detoxification. We can only go to the hospital. Time is tight. Let's go to the local hospital in Cambodia for treatment first. Li Nanheng looked down at the girl lying in the middle with a pale face. Feng Ling's eyelids were closed tightly, and her lips were dry. A few seconds later, he frowned coldly. Can the local hospital in Cambodia treat her? Although the medical level here is not as advanced as in the United States, there are still some hospitals in major cities that can save lives, and people here often come into contact with snakes. In my opinion, maybe we can take her to the hospital first. Otherwise, I'm afraid it's too late to take her back to Los Angeles now. Then let's find the nearest hospital first, Li Nanheng said, his face turning paler. Han Jin came over and heard their conversation. Seeing Li Nanheng's face, he suddenly came over and tore open the clothes on his back. Sure enough, he saw that his back had been dyed red with blood, and his shoulder blade had been pierced by a bullet. Even though the bullet only grazed the flesh and did not stay in the shoulder, the flesh and blood were severely injured, and this kind of pain was not easy for ordinary people to bear. As soon as he saw the wound on Li Nanheng's shoulder, the doctor turned back and hurriedly went to get the medicine box. "Boss Li, your wound is almost infected. Let me deal with it for you first." When the doctor came over, Li Nanheng kicked over the medicine box he carried. As the medicine box fell to the ground in a mess, he said expressionlessly, "There is no Boss Li here. Let's see Feng Ling first." But boss, however, as soon as he met Li Nanheng's cold eyes, the doctor didn't dare to say more and turned back to deal with Feng Ling's bite. Chapter 966. In a large local hospital in Cambodia, Feng Ling was sent to the emergency room for a day and a night. During this period, a doctor occasionally walked out of the emergency room. After inquiring, he learned that Feng Ling was sent to the hospital more than 10 hours after being bitten by a snake. It was not easy for him to survive, but the current situation was not ideal. Even if the venomous snake they sent could be made into a serum to detoxify the poison, the venom of this snake was very terrible. Besides, Feng Ling had been running and raising a gun after being bitten by the snake. The excessive exercise and the long-term flow of the poison in the blood were not easy to remove. The operation was still going on, but the situation was not ideal. After saying this, the doctor returned to the emergency room to continue saving people. Outside the emergency room, Han Jin, Xiao Su, and a group of people who rushed over from 11 base did not dare to speak and all looked at Li Nanheng with bated breath. "Boss, it's our fault. We came too late, causing Feng Ling and you to be trapped under the cliff for so long." Han Jin sighed and his eyes were heavy. He had watched Feng Ling grow up these years, And their relationship in the past 3 or 4 years was not shallow. If something really happened to Feng Ling, he would not feel good. It's my fault. If only we had cooperated with boss and the base hall to prepare for reinforcements in advance. In this way, it wouldn't have taken so long. If we had arrived a few hours earlier, things wouldn't have ended up like this. Xiao Su also sighed on the side. At the beginning, boss said that the military's action this time was not simple, and we couldn't just send reinforcements to alert the enemy. When boss went to explore the way alone, if we had enough foresight and prepared to set off at any time, we wouldn't have ended up like this. The drill master and captain of the rescue team frowned. What's the use of saying this now? We've seen that venomous snake. If you are bitten by this kind of snake and can't be sent to the hospital in time, you will die within 6 to 48 hours. It's a miracle that Feng Ling can survive. The doctor just told us the worst result. At present, the treatment has not ended. Maybe Feng Ling can survive. Xiao Su thought for a while, walked behind Li Nanheng, and raised his eyes to look at boss's expression. Seeing that boss's eyes were as cold as the sea, he lowered his voice and said, "Boss, do you want to call Dr. Qin over to help? I heard that Dr. Qin is not only very knowledgeable at home and abroad, but also familiar with many authoritative figures in the medical field. Now Feng Ling can't be sent back to the United States immediately, so we can only ask an authoritative doctor to save his life." Li Nanheng didn't speak at first. He looked at the lights in the emergency room. A moment later, he picked up his phone and called Qin Siding. Qin Siding, who had just returned to High City, received a call. Before he could speak, he heard the man's cold and hoarse voice on the other end of the line. "I'm here to save someone." When Qin Siding arrived in Cambodia, Feng Ling's emergency surgery was over, but as the previous doctor said, she did not wake up and was in a very bad condition. All her organs were rapidly failing. If she was not treated as soon as possible, even a Daoyuo immortal would not be able to save her life. Feng Ling was lying in the intensive care unit. Except for the designated medical staff, no one else was allowed to enter. There was only a transparent glass window that allowed one to see what was going on inside from the outside. Li Nanheng saw from the window that Feng Ling was connected to various medical equipment. She lay there as if she didn't feel any pain, her eyes closed quietly. His already thin and small face seemed to have become even thinner in just one day. His face was pale and bloodless. "Boss, Dr. Qin is here." At this time, Xiao Su walked to the door of the intensive care unit and saw the back of the man who had been standing in front of the window for a long time. Only then did Li Nanheng shift his gaze away from the person on the bed. He turned around and saw Qin Siding rushing over as quickly as possible, as well as the white-haired, blue-eyed and white-skinned middle-aged doctor beside him. This is Dr. Wendell. He has very authoritative medical research achievements in the medical and academic circles of the United States, and has a deep understanding of internal medicine and internal organs and blood toxins. After seeing Li Nanheng, Qin Siding didn't waste time talking nonsense and said directly, "Dr. Wendell and I talked about the detoxification method and the effective treatment effect of the poisonous snake you mentioned on the phone before coming here. Now we need to communicate with the doctors in the local hospital and ask them to cooperate with us. Dr. Qin, do you have any good ideas? Can she be saved?" Han Jin and Xiao Su asked nervously. Qin Siding didn't answer but took a look at Li Nanheng again and nodded to him in a way that only good brothers could understand. Not only did Li Nanheng understand, but so did the others. They looked at the backs of Qin Siding and Dr. Wendell with joy and expectation. Han Jin and Xiao Su immediately turned to call Feng Ling's attending doctor to discuss the treatment countermeasures. Feng Ling was pushed into the operating room again. This time, it was not a simple operation. The others didn't know what was going on and only knew that several female doctors were called in to help. It was said that the treatment this time was a combination of traditional Chinese medicine and Western medicine. First, she had to be soaked in traditional Chinese medicine. But wasn't Feng Ling a man? Why did he call several female doctors to take a medicinal bath? The people of 11 Base were puzzled, but seeing that Boss Li didn't say anything, no one dared to ask. Only Xiao Su and Han Jin quietly looked at each other after the female doctors entered the operating room. Just now, outside the operating room, they saw a doctor holding a list in his hand, on which was written Ms. Fong Ling, Ms. A woman. It turned out to be a woman? Boss obviously knew it long ago. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so calm. Perhaps Boss was even more shocked than them when he first found out. They just didn't know when he discovered this secret. Sure enough, nothing was groundless. Anyone who was close to the sniper team in the base could see that Boss Lee treated Fong Ling differently. Now it seemed that Fong Ling was indeed different. They didn't expect that Fong Ling, who was so fast and agile and never needed to worry about anything, was actually a woman. A girl who was less than 20 years old was so powerful. Han Jin and Xiao Su looked at each other in surprise and silence and couldn't say a word of doubt. This was probably a secret. Neither of them could easily mention it, so they had a tacit understanding. Gee, it turned out to be a girl. Terrible. It was shocking. No wonder Fong Ling killed that fat commander in a fit of rage. No girl could tolerate such a shameless and filthy act of drugging someone, let alone Fong Ling. Chapter 967. After 24 hours of soaking in a herbal bath to detoxify Fong Ling, Dr. Wendell's operation and the more professional method of treating snake venom in Cambodia. The emergency treatment lasted more than 48 hours. In the end, Fong Ling was still unconscious when she was pushed out of the operating room and sent back to the ICU. Just when everyone thought that she couldn't be saved, Chin Siding came out of the operating room, took off the sterilizing mask, and pulled off the airtight sterilizing coat on his body, saying, "Let's wait. This time the disinfection is very thorough. The wound on the shoulder and back is relatively large. Before the wound heals, it's better to stay in the ICU. Such a sterile environment is more helpful for Fong Ling's recovery. Although the wound is large, it won't leave any obvious scars, and it's mainly on the surface, so it's not a big problem. She can heal in 2 days." So, Li Nanheng looked at him, Chin sighting through the sterilizing coat in his hand to the place where clothes were put. Finally, he felt cool and said with a sigh of relief, "Don't worry, she's fine." But because the snake venom has been in her body for too long, the effect of the serum can't reach the best state, so this time she lost a lot of blood to cure the snake venom. She is now unconscious because she is very weak and has lost too much blood. She needs at least a few days to wake up. Xiao Su ran over and asked excitedly, "She's fine now?" Chin Siding glanced at him with a smile. "Are my words so untrustworthy?" Xiao Su hurriedly shook his head. No, of course, Dr. Chin's words are trustworthy. The point is that Fong Ling has 1 foot in the door of hell. If my brother wants someone, even if she has 2 feet in the door of hell, I will still fight with the king of hell for her, not to mention she just has 1 foot in the door of hell. Chin Siding said, unbuttoning the collar of his sweaty shirt. "All right, I'm going to take a shower. I'll pay close attention to Fong Ling's situation in Cambodia in the next few days. I'll go back to High City after making sure she's really fine. You rest first. I'll look for you later," Li Nanheng said lightly as Chin Siding brushed past him. Chin Siding snorted and said in a voice that only Li Nanheng could hear, "You'd better accompany your little Fong Ling first. The little girl is young, but she has experienced a lot. This kind of snake venom didn't take her life. She's lucky. It's rare for her to have a lover. You'd better cherish her. You always make your own decisions and are too lazy to explain anything. Don't make her disappear." Li Nanheng raised his brows and glanced back at him. "You have the nerve to lecture me?" Chin Siding knew that he was going to bring up Shi Nian's past again, so he turned around and left. As he walked, he unbuttoned the buttons on his shirt's collar one by one. His back view was elegant and at ease. Li Nanheng retracted his gaze. Because Fong Ling's condition had improved, coupled with Chin Siding's solemn promise, he was certain that she would not have any more problems. His mood was much more relaxed, and the dark clouds on his face finally cleared up. "Boss, Fong Ling is fine, then she..." Xiao Su was about to speak. But Li Nanheng suddenly turned around and walked toward the intensive care unit. Seeing the speed of Boss Li's footsteps, Xiao Su, she hadn't woken up yet. Did he have to walk so fast? It seemed that he was afraid that someone else would beat him to it. However, Xiao Su didn't dare to ask about Feng Ling's sex for the time being. After thinking about it, he went back to find Han Jin, and the two of them shared this shocking big secret alone. Los Angeles, the Feng family. Qin Qiu looked at her mother, who had been sitting on the sofa and stroking the round jade in her hand for more than an hour. Mom, at first, I also refused to do this, but today I can't stop it anymore. Firstly, Li Nanheng is indeed a good child. Secondly, the Li family and the Feng family will have such a day sooner or later. The fact that Li Nanheng would rather marry second brother Cenotaph than marry Mingzhu is indeed very annoying, but what happened recently has forced the Li and Feng families to work closely together. This engagement is still valid. Second brother's 18th birthday has passed. It's time to fulfill the agreement. At this time, Grandmother Feng and Grandfather Feng had already come downstairs. Seeing the two people on the sofa, they walked over. Grandmother Feng sat next to Qin Qiu's mother. The two old ladies leaned against each other and looked at each other. Then Grandmother Feng smiled. "In-law, I know you can't bear to part with her. Not to mention that this child only has a short year of fate with us when she was in swaddling clothes. Even if she is 80 years old in the future, we still can't bear to marry her, but since we can't bear to part with her, and someone is willing to marry her cenotaph, why don't we fulfill the Li family's wish? After all, the grandson of the Li family is a good person. You've seen him. It's not bad to give second brother a place to rest his soul. At least when Li Nanheng is 100 years old, he will meet her in the underworld. At least she won't always be alone." Qin Qiu's mother clenched the round jade in her hand and said sadly, "Didn't you say it's just a plan? Are we really going to let him marry second brother's cenotaph?" Grandfather Feng walked over with his cane. Although he was old, his eyes were full of spirit. He looked at the two old ladies on the sofa and said, "This time, the matter in the military area is very serious and caused a big butterfly effect. The Feng family is also connected to 11 base. Our Feng family and the Li family are safe because they care about the power of our two families. Once we are separated, they will have a chance to take advantage of us. Anyway, we have an engagement. We might as well get it done now. After all, 3 years ago, the Li family also promised that when second brother turns 18, he would talk to us about this matter. I've asked the elders of the Li family. Even if Li Nanheng has any objections, it's useless. Since he has agreed to marry the cenotaph, he must marry me." Speaking up to here, Grandfather Feng glanced at the round jade in Qin Qiu's mother's hand and sighed. "In-law, I know how happy you were after second brother was born. When Mingzhu was born, you held her all the time. After second brother was born, you were even more attentive. Back then, when that happened, we were not directly hospitalized. The reason why we were able to live until now is probably because second brother is watching us from the sky. Right now, we just want to give her a good home, and the timing is right. Let's let her marry." Qin Qiu's mother's eyes turned red. She lowered her head and touched the round jade in her hand. "I just think that such a young child is gone. Her soul must still be that of a child. Will she be wronged if she marries someone else like this? Mom, don't think too much. The Li family is indeed a good home," Qin Qiu said softly. Chapter 968. Feng Mingzhu walked out upstairs. When she passed the corner of the stairs on the second floor, she heard the conversation downstairs, and her eyes instantly turned cold. Good marriage, since it was a good marriage. Why did they want a dead person to occupy the position? She gripped the railing at the top of the stairs tightly and looked at the few people who were discussing this matter. Her eyes were cold as she turned back to her room and closed the door with a pung. "Miss." The servant passing by on the second floor heard the noise, turned back, and looked timidly at the little devil who often lost her temper, not knowing what was wrong with her. The people downstairs also heard the commotion coming from above. They looked at each other and knew exactly what Feng Mingzhu was angry about. But Li Nanheng refused to marry her. No matter how powerful the Feng family was, they couldn't force a woman Li Nanheng didn't want to marry to him. Now the only peaceful way was to accept Li Nanheng's proposal. But the marriage couldn't be delayed anymore, especially after the military took the opportunity to find fault with them. The Feng family and the Li family must unite by marriage so that there wouldn't be any mistakes. At the beginning, Li Nanheng said that when the second daughter of the Feng family passed the age of 18, he would directly marry her. Now, he had to keep his promise. Cambodian Hospital. On the third day after the snake venom in Feng Ling's body was completely eradicated, her physical indicators and blood finally gradually returned to normal, but she didn't wake up. When she was in a coma, her body was cold and hot. When it was cold, it was lower than an ordinary person's body temperature, and when it was hot, it was over 40 degrees. When Qin Siding and Dr. Wendell came to examine her, they said that this was a normal symptom of snake venom. Now the venom had been removed, but some of it would remain in some subtle places. It wouldn't hurt her body and life, but the body would automatically detoxify through the sweat glands on the surface of the skin. Therefore, a high fever was normal. She just needed to pay attention to physical cooling. Seeing that Feng Ling had just passed another high fever, the nurses in the hospital hurriedly took away the ice bag and came in to give Feng Ling an injection. When Li Nanheng stood in the ward, he held the list of military commanders sent by Xiao Su in one hand and took the thermometer handed to him by a nurse in the other. Seeing that Feng Ling's body temperature stayed at 37 degrees, he was relieved. He put down the thermometer and turned to look at the unconscious person on the bed. After all the nurses in the ward left, the room became quiet again. The man threw the things in his hands on the windowsill in the ward, turned around, and walked over. He tested Feng Ling's body temperature with his hand and then leaned down to her nose to feel that her breathing was smoother and more even than a few days ago. He then casually tugged the white blanket up and lowered his eyes to watch her sleeping appearance. In just a few days, he had lost a lot of weight. He was already very thin, but now he had lost even more weight. Li Nanheng was about to reach out to tidy up her slightly messy hair when he heard the door of the ward being pushed open, and he withdrew his hand. "Boss, the new commander of the military this time has been confirmed. He is the second person on the list. Those idiots in the military must have never thought that this person actually had a deep relationship with our 11 base. He is our comrade in arms and our senior brother. These bastards probably won't have any good days in the future." Xiao Su's voice came directly. However, because he was concerned about Feng Ling, who was still unconscious, even though it was good news and he was very excited, he still slightly lowered his voice. However, as soon as he came in, he saw that Boss Li was by the bed and seemed to be taking care of Feng Ling again. "Boss, you've been here for several days. The base has been waiting for the military to give us an explanation. The base hall has also kept in contact with the military. You'd better take some time to go back. After all, this matter is not only a matter of their reputation but also the life of our most capable sniper team member. Feng Ling has done what she should do, so she doesn't owe the military anything now. Now that they've caused trouble, we can take this opportunity to let them know our base." Xiao Su lowered his voice and walked over softly, looking at Feng Ling, who was still unconscious on the bed. "You've been here for several days. The base has been waiting for the military to give us an explanation. I just talked to the base hall on the phone. After Feng Ling wakes up, let's go back together," Li Nanheng said lightly. Xiao Su pondered. "But is it appropriate to stay in Cambodia like this?" "It's not inappropriate. The base will be fine without me in these days. The Li family is here, and the drill masters and people in charge of various training camps are here. Feng is also here. If the military needs anything, you can call him. Even if I am not present, he will convey the message to me." Li Nanheng said, ignored Xiao Su behind him, looked at Feng Ling's dry lips, turned back to pour a glass of water, and took a cotton swab to smear on her lips. At this moment, Li Nanheng paused slightly and looked at the water glass and cotton swab in his hand. This scene, why was it so familiar? But at that time, it was him who had dry lips because of the coma, and it was Feng Ling who took care of him meticulously by the bed. What happened after she took care of him? What happened? On the top of the snow mountain at Rogers Pass, and after coming back, Feng Ling's attitude changed. "Boss," Xiao Su said in a low voice, "when did Dr. Qin say she would wake up?" If you take her back to Los Angeles now, are you afraid that her body can't bear it? She can't suffer too much for the time being. Even if she wakes up, she needs to rest for a period of time and can't go back to the base for training. Li Nanheng put down the water glass in his hand, still looking at Feng Ling's face thoughtfully. If she doesn't go back to the base, where can she go? Xiao Su didn't dare to say that he already knew that Feng Ling was a girl. It's not that she hasn't been to my place. It's not a problem for her to live there for a while. Xiao Su, wasn't it like sending a sheep into a tiger's mouth? Feng Ling was so weak now. No matter how powerful she was still submissive in front of Boss Li. If Boss wanted to do anything to her now, she probably wouldn't even have the most basic strength to resist, right? Well, although he knew that Boss was not so shameless. But he had known Feng Ling's secret for a long time, but he didn't say anything. What did Boss mean? Was he afraid that other men in the base would hook up with Feng Ling? With Boss around, who dared to hook up with her? Chapter 969. The moment Feng Ling opened her eyes, she saw Li Nanheng's face. She thought that she was dead and Li Nanheng was also dead. She thought that the two of them were either in hell or heaven. Before she fully opened her eyes, she frowned at the same time. She wanted to speak but had no strength and could only open her eyes to look at him with difficulty. You've lost too much blood. It's normal for you to be weak. If you can't speak, then don't speak. Li Nanheng looked into her eyes and gently stroked her soft hair. Rest well. The snake venom has been removed. You will be fine. Be good, okay? Xiao Su watched from the side and listened. Mom too. A large-scale dog food scene? It turned out that Boss Li was such a master who didn't care about other people's feelings when it came to spoiling women. Did Boss think about the brothers who had been single in the base for tens of thousands of years? The only one who appeared was a woman disguised as a man, and she was taken in by Boss himself. What a beast! Feng Ling looked at him in a daze and couldn't speak. She could only stare at him as if she understood his words, but also as if she didn't. Perhaps her body really couldn't bear it for the time being. She only opened her eyes for a few minutes before closing them again. Li Nanheng looked at her. After confirming that she had fallen asleep again, he moved his hand away from her head. Right now, Feng Ling needed to rest. She needed enough sleep. She also needed time to recover from the loss of blood and the abnormal nerves caused by the snake essence. After sleeping for another 2 days, Feng Ling really woke up this time. When he woke up, he was no longer muddle-headed. Instead, he was very clear-headed. Li Nanheng flew back to Los Angeles in the past 2 days and returned to 11 base. When he returned to Cambodia, he pushed open the door and entered the ward, only to see Han Jin and Xiao Su sitting by the bed talking to Feng Ling. Both of them had cheerful smiles on their faces. Feng Ling's smile was slightly polite, and she obviously didn't have much energy to deal with these two people. But it was not difficult to know that the two of them had definitely told her everything that had happened after Feng Ling fell into a coma. Seeing that Boss Li was back, Han Jin and Xiao Su exchanged a look and said, "Well, Feng Ling, take a rest first. We'll talk when we come back." Feng Ling nodded. When the two of them left, she turned her gaze to the man who had already walked to the bedside. Li Nanheng looked down at her. "How long have you been awake?" Feng Ling looked at him and answered calmly, "About 2 or 3 hours. Drill Master Han and Brother Su have been talking to me." She paused for a moment and then said, "I didn't expect Dr. Chin's medical skills to be so good. I thought I was going to die. Did I wake up once before? At that time, I thought you were accompanying me to the gates of hell. I even wanted to say that I dragged you down, but I didn't expect that I could survive." Li Nanheng looked at her mockingly. "So do you want to thank Dr. Chin or me for your survival?" Feng Ling glanced at him again. "Thank you. There's no need to mention my loyalty to Boss. I'll do whatever you want me to do. As for Dr. Chin, if there's a chance in the future, I'll try my best to thank him in every way I can." Seeing that she had returned to her original self after waking up, he glanced at her with a sneer, took off his coat, threw it on the back of the chair by the bed, pulled the chair over, sat down by the bed, and glanced at her. "You're very calm." This time, Feng Ling understood his double meaning. She immediately withdrew her gaze from his eyes and lowered her head to glance at his shoulder. Boss, I heard that the gunshot wound on your shoulder was also very serious. Thank you so much for that time. Don't say thank you to me again. Lee Nanheng looked at her indifferently. You know very well that's not what I want. Feng Ling did not speak and could only withdraw her gaze. She lowered her head to look at her folded hands that were placed on the quilt and gently clasped together. Say what you said to me under the cliff again. The man saw that she was obviously hiding something, and his cold eyebrows slightly raised. Feng Ling clenched her hands and didn't speak. Are you mute? She looked up. Boss, do you know the consequences of disguising as a man in the base? The man's voice was cold as if he were settling scores after autumn. Feng Ling had a premonition that she might be driven out of the base at any time. Her eyes suddenly became a bit awkward, but after thinking for a long time, she didn't know how to explain. It seemed that no matter how she explained, it would be that she had violated the rules of the base. The law was merciless, not to mention such a large base. Not only did they have laws, but they also had their own standards, which couldn't be changed at will because of one person. In the end, she didn't explain but only lowered her eyes and said 2 words, I'm sorry. I've reminded you more than once to be honest, but you've been hiding it from me until now. If it wasn't for the critical moment of life and death, do you really intend to keep hiding it from me? Li Nanheng didn't care about her submissive appearance. He was already very familiar with her character and knew that she would only be so obedient when she did something wrong. Otherwise, if it was in normal times, she would be cold and quiet. I just don't want to leave 11 base. The things I said about my childhood are all true. The only thing I didn't say is my gender. If 11 base accepts women, I wouldn't have kept hiding it. I don't want to leave, boss. I know I lied to everyone. You gave me a chance, but I really... Feng Ling's hands clenched on the quilt. Maybe if it wasn't for that critical moment, I wouldn't have so easily told my secret, and only told it to you. Li Nanheng's expression was originally not good. However, when he heard her last sentence, which was only directed at him, the corners of his lips rose slightly when she turned her head away. Only told it to me? What do you mean? Feng Ling clenched her hands tightly. He didn't know whether she was nervous or embarrassed when she suddenly began to be honest, but she just didn't look into his eyes. She looked down at her hands and said, It's just that I don't intend to let anyone else know about this matter. Boss, it's enough for you to know it alone. What's the difference between me knowing it alone and everyone else knowing it? The man asked deliberately. Feng Ling could hear his intention, but she still had to answer, because, boss, didn't you say you like me? When she said this, Feng Ling felt that this was the most embarrassing scene in her life in the past 10 years. Her voice was a little hoarse, so low that it was almost inaudible. I just feel that I can't live up to your love, boss, so I have to be honest with you before I die. Chapter 970. Li Nanheng resisted the urge to smile and said with a smile, You have to be honest before you die? Do you regret being so honest now that you find that you won't die? No, I didn't. Since I said it, I have to pay the price for what I did. If boss wants me to leave the base, I won't defend myself. I will leave. When Feng Ling said this, her nails dug into her palms. It was really difficult for her to say such words. Perhaps it was because he had just faced a life and death situation. Perhaps her obsession with the base, her so-called home, would no longer be so important. Li Nanheng looked at her. When did I say I want you to leave? Feng Ling paused and turned to look at him. Isn't the base's rule that women are not allowed in? Li Nanheng raised his eyebrows and didn't say anything more. He just looked at her. Let's talk about this after we return to the base. It's not up to you to decide whether to stay or leave, nor is it up to me to decide. I want to know, after pretending to be a man for so many years, have you never thought about when you will be discovered? No. She looked at him. I also want to know. Boss, you've been so calm after knowing my secret. You don't even look surprised. Did you already know? Li Nanheng snorted. Guess. She wouldn't guess. He didn't want to guess either. But what she could be sure of was that that night on the snowy mountain he did not know that she was a woman. Otherwise, he would not have been so innocent after waking up and always suspected her. It was precisely because he didn't know that he didn't put the blame on her. But that's not necessarily the case anymore. Why is she thinking about that when she's not doing anything? Under Li Nanheng's indescribable gaze, Feng Ling raised her hand to tidy up the hospital gown on her body. Feeling that she was not wearing anything under the hospital gown, she was not used to the emptiness and did not feel safe, so she simply lifted the quilt and wrapped it under her neck. Then she lay down on the bed and whispered, "Boss, I want to rest." Seeing that she avoided the difficult questions and refused to say a word, Li Nanheng didn't force her. Even if he wanted to force her, now was not the time. Does the snake bite still hurt? He looked at the short-haired girl lying on the bed and changed the topic. Feng Ling tried to move her arm. "It's much better." However, as soon as she finished speaking, the man who was sitting on the chair by the bed suddenly stood up, tugged down her quilt, and tugged down the loose collar of her hospital gown, revealing half of her shoulder. His movements were quick and smooth. Feng Ling was caught off guard and revealed half of her shoulder. Usually they were both men, so be it. But now, facing him as a woman, all of a sudden, she blushed and tried to pull her clothes up, but Li Nanheng frowned and said coldly, "Don't move. Let me see." Feng Ling. The man's fingers caressed the skin around her shoulders that was no longer red. Feng Ling pursed her lips and did not speak. "At that time, in order to extract a portion of the poisonous serum, I had to make a cross cut on your wound. Fortunately, the suture here was done well. After a few days of medication, the redness and swelling on the surface have disappeared," the man said as he turned his gaze back to her face. The girl's shoulder was half exposed and she seemed a little embarrassed. When she turned her head, the outline of her chin seemed to be written with all kinds of subtle awkwardness that only men and women would have. Li Nanheng looked at her with an incomprehensible smile in his eyes. He did not immediately pull her shoulders up but maintained this posture to look at her. Rest in Cambodia for a few more days, and then take the base's helicopter back to Los Angeles. Feng Ling still did not look at him. Her voice was a little muffled. She felt the slight coolness when her shoulder touched the air, and because her identity as a woman was exposed, she could not turn her head to meet his eyes no matter how hard she tried, so she could only keep tilting her head to talk. "After returning to Los Angeles, don't go back to the base for the time being. Go back to my apartment to recuperate. As for your gender, we'll talk about it later." As Li Nanheng spoke, the tip of his thumb seemed to inadvertently rub the side of the girl's white, tender, and round shoulder. Feng Ling suddenly shivered all over, suddenly raised her hand to push his hand away, and at the same time, quickly pulled up the clothes on her shoulders, saying, "Boss, have you seen it? It really doesn't hurt. There's no need to see it again in the future, and there's a doctor to help me apply medicine. You don't have to worry anymore." Li Nanheng lowered his eyes to look at her. "When we were brothers, you could even sleep in the same bed, but now you've become a woman. You can't even see your shoulders?" Feng Ling, who was willing to sleep in the same bed as him when they were brothers? Which time was not forced by him. She had always maintained a certain distance and propriety in their brotherly love, okay? All along, he was the one who had no propriety in touching her. She didn't speak but directly covered the quilt over her body, pulled it up to her neck, and wrapped herself completely in it. Her eyes were still averted, and she said sullenly, "No, boss, don't misunderstand." "Misunderstand what?" Li Nanheng resisted the urge to lower his head, press the girl into his arms, and kiss her fiercely. He sat back on the chair, stretched his long legs casually, and looked at her from the corner of his eyes. "I do have a big misunderstanding and doubt in my heart. I need you to explain it to me." "What?" "In Rogers Pass, what happened that night when I had a high fever and was forced to drink by Fat Tai?" Feng Ling's expression did not change, but her voice was still a little sullen. "Nothing happened. I just took care of you for a whole night, and the next day, because I was not feeling well, I went to the tent next door to lie down for a few days." It was still not the truth. Li Nanheng could roughly guess what he should have done to her. Maybe he kissed, hugged, or pressed her on the bed, something like that. But he really couldn't recall too many memories of that night. He didn't know what he did. Was it just kissing and hugging on the bed, or did something really happen? So, after that, you seem to want to break up with me. Why are you angry with me? Li Nanheng glanced at her. The corner of Feng Ling's mouth twitched, and her eyes flickered. Boss, when have I not been angry after you kissed me? Chapter 971. You'll be angry if I kiss you? And more or less. Before Feng Ling could finish her words, the man who was originally sitting on the chair by the bed suddenly stood up and approached her. With a speed that caught her off guard, he pressed her under his body and placed his hands on either side of the bed. He lowered his black eyes and looked at her at such a close distance. Their noses were almost touching, and the distance between their lips was also very close. She was startled and did not dare to speak. She just stared at him blankly, not understanding what he was suddenly doing. If I kiss you again now, will you still be angry? The man's eyes were somewhat evil and mischievous. He pressed her against the bed and had no intention of letting her avoid this topic. Feng Ling looked at the man in front of her in disbelief. She was so stiff that she did not dare to move or speak. Li Nanheng lowered his eyes to look at her. Let me try kissing you now, Feng Ling, boss? Her voice was a little tight. She tried to hide her head under the pillow and put her hands between their bodies. Don't mess around. When you were pretending to be a man, I kissed you many times. But can I kiss you now? Li Nanheng smiled. Feng Ling turned her face away and could not push him away. She could only turn to pull the quilt up, cover her mouth with the quilt, and then put on a firm expression of refusal. Looking at her expression, Li Nanheng really wanted to kiss her until she couldn't breathe and until she cried and begged for mercy. However, seeing that her face was still pale because of excessive blood loss, he suppressed his desire to swallow her alive again and again. He suddenly lowered his head. When Feng Ling subconsciously closed her eyes, he did not pull the quilt covering her mouth away but turned to lean down to her ear, whispering, "You rest well for me. I'm not in a hurry. After you recover, we'll settle the score." Hearing his words, Feng Ling's blood temperature inexplicably soared, and because the man's breath brushed against her ear, all the hair on her body stood up. What account? Feng Ling didn't know where the courage came from, but she suddenly said such an impulsive sentence. After saying it, she regretted it. Why would she ask that? The man chuckled by her ear, and his hoarse voice moved closer to her ear. The itchy and hot feeling made her shrink her neck, but she heard the man's lips graze her earlobe. You bent me, and now you're straightening me. I have to ask for some compensation for my mental damage. The man's hoarse voice seemed to echo in her ears. Feng Ling shrank her neck to hide. However, just when she felt that she couldn't avoid it, Li Nanheng stood up and let her go. She instantly had more space to breathe. She turned to look at him, only to see that the man had returned to the chair by the bed and sat down. His unruly posture was as if he was deliberately teasing her by grabbing onto one of her pigtails. Yet, after teasing her, he was still so calm and collected. At the beginning, Feng Ling's heart was a little upset because the secret of her gender was so openly known by him, but now, not only did it not improve at all, but it also became even more upset. How could she let her heart become so unsettled because of a man? While Li Nanheng got up to pour water for her, she covered her face with the quilt and did not show her face for a long time. She just sulked. Li Nanheng took the cup back. Seeing her covering her face with the quilt, he said with a mocking smile, "It's useless to cover your face with the quilt. You can't go back, Miss Feng." Miss Feng covered in the quilt. When Feng Ling was finally allowed to leave the hospital and return to Los Angeles to recuperate, it had been nearly 10 days since she was bitten by the snake. For several days in a row, the food she ate was light and all kinds of blood-enriching food. Her mental state had improved a lot and she was no longer so haggard. Except for the occasional numbness on the arm bitten by the snake, there was no other problem. Before leaving Cambodia, Chin Siding came to see her and said that because the snake venom stayed in her body for too long, the nervous system of her body must have been affected. The temporary numbness was normal, which showed that her nervous system was actively recovering and would be fine in a few days. After returning to Los Angeles, Li Nanheng did not let Feng Ling directly return to the base. Even if he didn't say it, since the fat military commander was killed, she was very clear that although there were many people in the base who liked her and wanted to protect her, there were also many people who disliked her. It was certainly a good thing that Boss Li gave her a secluded environment to recuperate. However, the fact that she could not return to the base for the time being made Feng Ling feel a little disappointed. Compared to the carefree life of eating and sleeping outside, she preferred to train in the base every morning and evening, throwing hot blood and sweat day after day. Although she was a woman, she still liked holding a gun in her hand. Unlike now, because he needed time to recover, he was so weak that he had to be helped into the car with a coat. Li Nanheng glanced at Feng Ling, who had just sat in the car. Now we've returned to Los Angeles. If there's nothing else I want to do, I'll drive back to the apartment. Feng Ling glanced at him. Boss, will my arm be crippled? Will I even be unable to pick up a sniper rifle in the future? Li Nanheng glanced at her arm. As he spoke, he waved his hand in front of her. Forget about the ligament injury in my wrist. Pulling Fat Tai out of the ice hole wouldn't leave any sequelae on my wrist. This is just a temporary nerve paralysis in your arm. Qin Siding also said that it won't take long for you to recover. Feng Ling looked at his hand. Are you really all healed? Li Nanheng raised his hand and patted her gently on the head. When I carried you to the edge of the cliff in the Snake Valley, I used this hand to support you. Do you think I'm all healed? In fact, Feng Ling also knew that people like them who had been trained for a long time would recover much faster than ordinary people no matter what kind of injuries they suffered. She was relieved and moved her arm again. It's good that I can still pick up a sniper rifle. My sniper training has just reached the middle stage, and I haven't finished it yet. I don't want to give up. Seeing that she wanted to stay in the base no matter what, Li Nanheng smiled. Then don't give up. Chapter 972. Li Nanheng didn't say anything more about whether she could return to the base or not. He drove her back to her apartment. Before entering the condo, Feng Ling glanced at the number of the elevator on the floor below his condo. She silently thought that if her body condition was still good, she should go out to look for furniture stores, buy some furniture, and then move in. Li Nanheng glanced at her. Don't think about living on the floor below. There's time to renovate and change the furniture. You've already recovered and can return to the base at any time. Feng Ling, she turned to look at him. She didn't say anything. How did he guess what she was thinking? Li Nanheng's cold brows moved. Do you really think I can't see through your little thoughts? Feng Ling, she walked into his apartment again. It was no different from before. The cold wind was blowing outside, but the temperature inside was as warm as spring. But now there seemed to be something different. For example, the last time she lived here, she was still a man. But now she moved in, Li Nanheng had brought her back knowing that she was a woman. It was another concept for a man and a woman to be alone. Boss. Feng Ling glanced at him. Li Nanheng glanced back at her. What's wrong? Feng Ling's lips moved. She wanted to say something, but she felt that it seemed too delicate. After all, she had lived here before, and now her mentality had changed. Perhaps, although she wasn't sure, perhaps he had already known her secret. Otherwise, how could he not be surprised at all? Thinking of this, Feng Ling took a step back awkwardly. I'm still, Li Nanheng raised his brows. You want to move out? She nodded. Are you afraid that after I know you are a woman, I can't control myself and go to your place in the middle of the night to plot against you? If you want to move out, you can. Give me a convincing reason. Her legs were straight, and her hands were by her sides. She looked as though she was being trained on the training ground of the base. She was very serious. I feel that Han Jin and Xiao Su should also know about it. I've been in Cambodia for so many days. Although the doctor didn't emphasize my gender, I saw that I'm a woman on the medical record. Xiao Su and the others must have seen it, so my matter will probably be spread out sooner or later. The elders of the Li family value your reputation very much. I don't want your reputation to be affected because of my own affairs. Li Nanheng's eyes were wide open, and his eyes were wide open. He looked at Li Nanheng and Li Nanheng. Li Nanheng sneered, threw the black duffel bag in his hand to the ground, and turned back to walk to her. When others suspected your sexual orientation, I didn't care about my reputation. Now I just brought a girl back to my place. What? Am I living for others to see? Or can other people's mouths hurt me even a little? Feng Ling looked at him. But the elders of the Li family care about it very much. If I had lived the way they told me to live since I was a child, you wouldn't see me now. The man approached and raised his hand to brush past her cheek and ear. When Feng Ling did not move, he directly slammed the door behind her with a peng sound. Then Li Nanheng turned back to the sofa. Don't think too much. Stay here first. I asked you to come here to recuperate. What do you think I want to do? Hearing his tone, Feng Ling felt that he was very righteous. If Feng Ling hadn't been deceived by this man's sanctimonious appearance, how would she have been dragged into the whirlpool of emotions that she had never understood again and again? In fact, she was still very confused. She didn't even know what kind of feelings she had for Boss Li. Gratitude? Dependence? But since he said so, she didn't think too much. She went up to open the duffel bag he put down, took out her clothes from it, and was about to return to the bedroom where she lived before. Li Nanheng's voice suddenly floated over from the side. Don't you have any normal clothes to wear? Feng Ling looked at the 2 sets of black uniforms and loose t-shirts in her arms and then at him. What are normal clothes? Except for the base uniforms. The sportswear I'm wearing is very good. Li Nanheng raised his eyebrows. Women's clothes? Feng Ling. I don't want to wear it. I have to go back to the base. Only in front of me? No! Hearing such a firm refusal, Li Nanheng didn't speak but leaned against the shelf by the wall of the living room, looking at Feng Ling, who was dressed like a little boy. She probably didn't know that no matter what she wore, he could still get hard when he wanted to, whether it was men's clothes or women's clothes. As long as she was a woman inside, it didn't matter what she wore. You've been rushing all the way back from Cambodia. Your physical fitness is not good now. Go to rest first. Li Nanheng looked at her and said lightly. She didn't expect that he would let her go so easily on this topic. Feng Ling was a little uncertain, but seeing that he really didn't want to say more, she took the clothes and turned around. When she was about to walk into the bedroom, Li Nanheng's voice floated over from behind. It seems that it's not convenient for you to wear my clothes. I'll ask someone to buy you 2 sets of pajamas and home clothes, okay? Thank you, boss. Feng Ling said, quickly entered the bedroom, and then quickly closed the door. In the evening, Feng Ling saw that someone from a nearby department store had sent a few bags of things over. She had just walked back and forth in the living room to maintain her physical activity and went to open the door. She took the bags and saw the signs on the bags. Knowing that they were sent from the nearest department store, she suspiciously carried the bags in and threw them on the sofa. Boss, are these what you want? She looked up at the man who came out of the kitchen with a coffee cup in his hand. Li Nanheng glanced at the sofa disapprovingly as he walked, said, "Are these for you?" and went straight into the study. Feng Ling looked at these things in front of her in surprise. Didn't he say that he would only buy 2 sets of pajamas for her? What was with these dozen or so bags? She picked up one of the bags in confusion. Inside was a set of pajamas, pink. Although it was not the kind of feminine style with various small flowers and small lace edges, she could tell it was a very plain and pink lady's style at a glance. Looking at this set of pajamas, Feng Ling instantly remembered what Li Nanheng said just now and felt that she had been tricked by this man. She should have specially told him not to buy women's pajamas. Chapter 973. She opened another bag and found 2 pairs of shoes. Flat shoes, a pair of white sneakers, and a pair of casual black canvas shoes, which matched well with any kind of clothes. They were also for women. When she opened the other bags, there weren't any clothes that were too girly. Most of them were sportswear that she liked to wear. However, even the sportswear was for women. From the color and style, it was obvious that it was for women. It was very different from the men's sportswear that she was wearing. The men's sportswear was flat, while the women's sportswear had curves in front of the chest and waist. The colors were also very simple and clean. They were styles and colors that she could accept. If these clothes were dresses or the like, Feng Ling would immediately run out to chase the people from the food department and throw the things back into their hands. She would definitely not accept them. Looking at these clothes, Feng Ling's lips curved up slightly. She casually picked up the 2 bags at the bottom and opened them. The moment she opened them, the smile on her face froze, and the corners of her mouth trembled. What was this? She picked up a pink women's underwear and looked at the 2 cups that seemed to be very suitable for her. Then she looked down at her chest that was not wrapped in a chest cloth. Feng Ling opened the other bag at the bottom. Sure enough, it was another woman's underwear. One was black and the other was pink. He had asked the people in the mall to send at least 2 sets of everything. Was this reserved for her to change into? She could accept women's sportswear and sneakers, or slightly feminine pajamas and pajamas. Anyway, she could accept them as long as they were not nightgowns, but this underwear, she had long been used to wearing a chest cloth. Except for the time when she deliberately dressed as a woman in the bar, she had never touched this kind of thing. Now it was so open and aboveboard, Feng Ling couldn't help blushing. She stuffed all the things back into the bag and turned back to the bedroom without taking any of them. At night, when Li Nanheng came out from work, he saw those things piled up on the sofa, glanced at the closed door opposite, and walked over to knock on the door. After knocking for a while, there was no response. The man outside the door said indifferently, "Do you want me to open the door directly with the key?" After a moment of silence, the sound of footsteps could be heard, and then the door was opened. Feng Ling was holding a razor that she had found in his bedroom. Her expression was slightly awkward. Li Nanheng looked at the thing in her hand and then at her. "What do you want?" "My hair has grown quite a bit, and I want to shorten it. Didn't you say that you often shave it yourself? I just want to try and see if I can shave my head flat," Feng Ling said as she picked up the razor in her hand. "This is charged, right? Is it out of battery? Why can't I do it?" Looking at her serious expression, Li Nanheng raised his hand to take the razor back and threw it onto the sofa not far behind him. The razor rolled onto the carpet, making a muffled sound. "Why do you need to shave your head? Your hair is just below your ears." "There's no need to shave it," Li Nanheng said and glanced at her clothes. "Didn't I buy you pajamas? Why are you still wearing this?" Feng Ling was still wearing the same set of clothes that she used to wear when she lived here. It was his home clothes. However, she was clearly wearing a small vest inside. She was no longer in a vacuum state because of the lack of clothes. "You'd better ask the people from the mall to take those things back. I don't want to wear them." Feng Ling raised her hand and tugged at her hair. "Boss, gender is actually just a concept. I've regarded myself as a man since I was young. I'm used to it. I can't get used to wearing women's clothes now." Li Nanheng snorted. "I'm not forcing you to wear those things that you can't get used to for the time being. They are all sports styles that you like. If you don't like them, you can throw them away tomorrow morning. There's no need to send them back." "Feng Ling," the man glanced at her indifferently. "Are you planning to be a man for the rest of your life?" Feng Ling looked back at him. "I don't know. I don't have any concept. When I was young, I lived with wolves. Later, I was brought out by others. I only know how to protect myself. I don't know anything else. I just want to ask you, if you want to be a man, do you want to try to change back into a woman and live as a normal girl of 17 or 18 years old?" A normal girl of 17 or 18 years old. Was she? Could she? Li Nanheng raised his hand and touched her head. "Don't shave your hair anymore. Many boys also like to keep their hair long. There's no need for you to deliberately make it very short to hide yourself. Those who know already know, and those who don't know will know sooner or later. It may be worth it to use your hair as the price to hide yourself in the past, but it's not worth it now." Feng Ling didn't speak again. "I'll give you one night. Think about it carefully. Do you want to persist as a man or return to the life of a normal girl? I can help you with whatever you want. Think about it yourself." Feng Ling didn't quite understand what he meant and just looked at him blankly. Could he help her with whatever she wanted? Even if he wanted to live like a man forever? Seeing the man's eyes, Feng Ling didn't immediately answer but looked out of the door. Li Nanheng walked out, also glanced at the bags piled on the sofa, and then looked back at her who had already walked out of the door. Put these away first. The cabinet in your bedroom is empty. Put them all in. If you want to wear them one day, at least there will be a few clothes for you to wear. With that, the man didn't say anything more and went straight into the study. The door of the study was not closed. Feng Ling knew that Boss Li was usually busy talking to people in the base hall or sending documents in the study. There was a computer in the study. He had to deal with some emergencies in the base and the Li Corporation at any time. Feng Ling walked out and stood by the sofa to look at those things. In the end, she didn't want to let down Boss Li's kindness. From the style of these clothes, she could tell that he was actually letting her slowly adapt to them instead of immediately buying a dress and forcing her to wear it. She took those things back to the bedroom one by one and walked back and forth very quietly, for fear of disturbing Boss Li. When the last bag was moved, she quietly closed the door and put the things in the bag into the wardrobe. She held the pink underwear in her hand and was about to put it in, when she suddenly paused. Feng Ling looked at the underwear in her hand that even the cup size was very suitable. She didn't have to think about it to know how Li Nanheng knew her size. When they kissed in the bar, he raised his hand and touched it for a long time. Chapter 974. She hesitated in the room for a long time. Feng Ling had never been so hesitant since she was a child when she killed someone with a gun for the first time. Holding the pink lingerie in her hand, after a while, she looked up at the door, making sure that Li Nanheng was busy and would not come in, nor would he come to see her. After thinking for a while, she turned into the bathroom, stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror, and put on the lingerie. Probably because she was young, the skin of a 17 or 18-year-old girl was as white as jade. Wearing this kind of pink lingerie that few people could handle, she looked really beautiful. Feng Ling seemed to have seen this kind of lingerie in the wild magazines on the roadside. A young girl wearing this kind of lingerie was youthful and sexy. After putting on this lingerie, Feng Ling looked out of the bathroom. After making sure that Li Nanheng did not come in, she ran to the wardrobe, picked up the light-colored pajamas, put them on, and turned back to the mirror to look at herself. The pajamas were long-sleeved and long pants, pink and tender, and no part of her body was exposed. However, because she was wearing lingerie, her chest, which had been wrapped by the chest-wrapping cloth, was now in a normal, soft and round state. She was used to having a flat chest, but suddenly, she blushed and her heart beat faster. How could she go out like this? Could she let Boss Li take a look? The figure of the girl in the mirror was exactly what a woman should look like. Although her hair was short, it had grown past her ears. She only needed to go out and trim her hair, and she would look like a very playful short-haired little woman. She wore this set of clothes in the room for a long time. In the end, Feng Ling did not rush to take it off. Instead, she lay on the bed and felt the clothes. In fact, she usually wrapped her chest cloth very tightly. In the beginning, she would feel uncomfortable and breathless when she lay down, but after a long time, she got used to it. Now wearing the lingerie, she didn't feel uncomfortable at all but felt very relaxed. Was she going to be a woman? Feng Ling kept lying, lowered her head to look at the pajamas on her body, and then raised her hand to look at her hand. Although her fingers were slender and white, when she opened her palm, she could still see the light calluses inside. He suddenly recalled the time when he was brought out of the jungle, and the experiences he had in the past 10 years. Be a normal 17 or 18-year-old girl. Could she? Lying on the bed, he didn't know when he fell asleep. When he woke up, it was already past 10 o'clock at night. Recently, she had been resting in the hospital and often slept, so sleeping had become a habit. She hadn't gone back to the base for training for a short period of time, but now her biological clock had been completely disrupted. She could actually sleep in the evening and wake up at night. This was something she had never experienced before. In the past, he would wake up at 5 in the morning for morning training, and he had to sleep before 10 at night. After waking up, he sat up and felt as though there was something extra in front of his chest. Actually, it wasn't anything extra. It was just that it wasn't wrapped tightly anymore. There were 2 more lumps in front of his eyes. She got up and turned on the light. She stood at the door and hesitated for a long time before she opened the door and walked out. Although it was already late, it was clear that Lee Nanheng was still awake. The lights in the living room were on, and so were the lights in the study. There was a faint aroma of food in the air. Feng Ling looked around and saw several dishes on the dining table close to the kitchen, but they were all covered with a layer of insulated bowls. Was that the dinner boss Lee asked someone to send over? Did he specially leave it for her? Feng Ling was about to walk over when the door of the study opened. Lee Nanheng came out with a stack of documents in his hand. When he suddenly saw the person standing at the dining table, he paused and suddenly turned to look at her. First, he saw the light-colored pajamas on Feng Ling. Although they were pajamas and pajamas, they were a little like a half-length doll's dress, which looked a little playful and cute. More importantly, she didn't wrap the breast wrap to cover her healthy and normal chest, but put on that set of underwear. The girl's perfect figure was not affected by the restraint of these breast wrappings at all. Even though it was just a set of pajamas and a silhouette that had restored her original figure, Lee Nanheng was still dazed for a few seconds. When Feng Ling suddenly reached out to open the food on the table, he put down the document in his hand and walked over. "I knew you were asleep. Someone sent dinner over, so I didn't wake you up. Sit down first. I'll heat up the food." "No, it's good to eat like this." Feng Ling looked back at Lee Nanheng. Although she felt a little embarrassed, she still said, "I don't think it's particularly cold. It's edible. Heat it up first." Lee Nanheng patted away her hand that was about to cover the food and took it into the kitchen. Seeing that the man who clearly didn't know how to cook was preparing to heat up the dishes for her, Feng Ling stood outside and helped bring the food in. She took a few steps back and looked at the man who was standing by the stove with a frown. It was clear that he didn't know how to cook these things but was trying his best not to show his weakness. For some reason, she felt that Boss Lee was a little cute like this. If he didn't know how to cook, he didn't need to be so omnipotent. It was enough as long as he was her Boss Lee. Besides, she didn't know how to cook herself. It was already a success if she didn't have a stomachache when she cooked a bowl of noodles. It wasn't that difficult to heat up the dishes. She took out the pot, put it on the stove, and put it in the microwave. Everything was done in 5 minutes. Feng Ling didn't help much and went to the table to wait for the food to be eaten. After the food was served by the man again, Lee Nanheng brought her a bowl and chopsticks. Feng Ling took it, thanked him, and began to eat. However, after taking 2 bites, she suddenly felt a pain on the back of her hand. She was startled and raised her eyes abruptly, only to see the man who suddenly took out the chopsticks in her hand and slapped the back of her hand. "Boss? Dressed like this, are you going to be a normal girl?" The man stood by the table and looked down at her. Feng Ling didn't understand what he meant, but looked at him and said directly, "I just want to try it first." "Since you want to try it, then I want to try to be a normal girl," Lee Nanheng said as he put the chopsticks back on the table and said indifferently, "Change your eating speed and movements. Aren't you a rough man who wolfs down food? Aren't you afraid of choking when eating so fast?" "I'm in a hurry to go to training every day. I'm afraid of being late. I'm used to it, eat slowly." The man sat by the table, sipped his coffee and watched her pick up the chopsticks strangely again. He raised his eyebrows when she didn't notice, and there was an imperceptible smile on his lips. Disciplining the little wolf girl, this job he found for himself was really not bad. Chapter 975. Feng Ling didn't expect to be asked to eat. She didn't know whether she felt wronged or not, but when she saw that Boss Lee was drinking coffee and then looked at the food in front of her, she didn't say anything and did as he asked. She picked up a mouthful of food, put it into the bowl, and ate slowly. Looking at her aggrieved but trying to cooperate, Lee Nanheng smiled. "You don't have to chew slowly, but at least you don't have to eat quickly like Kay and the others. It's not good for your stomach to eat too fast, remember?" She didn't say anything but lowered her eyes and didn't look at him. He saw that Feng Ling had been restraining the amount and speed of picking up food with chopsticks and deliberately slowed down when chewing. although she didn't want to be obedient. In fact, she was still trying to cooperate. What a stubborn but soft-hearted little girl. After eating, Feng Ling put down the bowl and chopsticks and was about to take them to the kitchen to wash. Li Nanheng asked her to throw them into the dishwasher first. She stood in front of the dishwasher for a long time and studied where the switch was and how to use it. Suddenly, a hand came from behind and helped her open the dishwasher. As soon as she put the bowl in and closed the door, she heard a beep and the machine began to wash automatically. Feng Ling was about to turn away when she realized that the man didn't step back after helping her open the dishwasher. Instead, the moment she turned around, he held her in his arms. Feng Ling stiffened and was about to struggle, but the man held her tightly from behind and put his chin on the top of her head. "Don't move." But Feng Ling was a little embarrassed by this seemingly warm hug. This feeling is very good. Hold me for a while." The man's words were so straightforward that Feng Ling didn't even have time to blush, and her heart felt as if a jar of honey had been pushed over. She stood still and looked down at the man's hand on her lower abdomen. "Boss, although I am a woman, but you also like me. Don't explain too much. I understand." The man directly finished her words. Feng Ling, understand what? Even she didn't understand. Did this man have to be so narcissistic? She suddenly wanted to turn around and push him away, but the man hugged her tightly. "Be good, don't move. It's just a hug. I didn't do anything to you." "No, boss, I want to explain to you clearly I didn't." "Nothing?" The man's low voice landed on her head. "Even if you're very ignorant about feelings, you should be clear that apart from me, you're very repulsed by anyone getting close to you. Do you really want me to tell you everything? At that time, I'm afraid that you'll be so shy that you'll hide in your room and not come out. Don't think that others can't see through your thoughts just because you've been pretending to be a man for so long. You're always transparent in front of me, huh? Little girl." The man's last few words made Feng Ling's expression instantly uncomfortable, but it seemed that what he said was very reasonable. Did she like him that much? "If you want to go back to 11 base, go back. If you don't want to go back, just stay here with me. You'll never leave me. Don't think about leaving me. Whether in the base or outside, you're mine." Li Nanheng said and directly lowered his head to kiss the girl's face. Feng Ling was about to dodge, but the man only kissed her on the cheek. She slightly turned her head away, and the man simply hugged her tighter and bent down to kiss her several times on the face. "Are you still going to dodge?" Why couldn't she dodge? Who would ever confess in such a shameful manner? He was really a straight man. Just when Feng Ling in his arms didn't know what to do, Li Nanheng's cell phone rang at this moment. The man originally wanted to force the little girl to the corner to give her a good kiss. At first, he ignored the cell phone ringing, but when Feng Ling reminded him, he didn't leave. It was not until the second time that his cell phone rang that he realized there must be something urgent calling at this time. The man finally let go of the girl in his arms and returned to the study to answer the phone. Feng Ling hurriedly left the kitchen and rushed all the way back to the bedroom to close the door. Li Nanheng was answering the phone when he heard the sound of the door closing outside. He turned his head in that direction and saw Feng Ling's back as she trotted all the way back to the room, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly. Feng Ling didn't know how long she would live in Boss Li's place, but he really didn't intend to let her live elsewhere. Several times, he returned to the base to deal with things, and she also wanted to go back with him, but he sent her back to the apartment. After repeating this several times, she knew that she really couldn't go back for the time being, so she simply gave up. After more than 10 days, Feng Ling felt that living in the apartment was about to become moldy. Although there were a lot of fitness equipment at home, when she was alone at home, she didn't even have anyone to talk to. She didn't want to watch TV or play computer games to kill time, so she simply went to the hairdresser near the apartment to have her hair trimmed. It was not the kind that was very short, but slightly trimmed. When she cut her hair, the hairdresser asked enthusiastically while helping her cut her hair, "Beauty, do you like short hair very much? Your face is very beautiful, and your short hair is also very delicate and beautiful, but I feel that if you slowly change to long hair, you will be particularly stunning. Do you want to get a haircut? It's not expensive at all." "No need." Feng Ling ignored him, sitting there and looking down at the magazine she took casually. The hairdresser said with a regretful expression, "Why do the more beautiful girls like to wear short hair nowadays?" Beautiful? Feng Ling raised her head to look at herself in the mirror. She was wearing the women's sportswear. In fact, it was also sportswear, but from the color and style, it could be seen that it was very different from the men's sportswear. In addition, she didn't deliberately speak in a rough voice, so the hairdresser could tell at a glance that she was a woman. So was her cross-dressing journey about to come to an end? After the haircut, Feng Ling raised her hand to rub her hair, which was not much shorter, and was about to go back when suddenly her cell phone rang. Seeing that it was a call from Xiao Fei, she directly picked it up. "Where are you?" Xiao Fei's voice was a bit hoarse. Feng Ling was puzzled by his voice and his tone that seemed to be in a bad mood, so she directly answered, "In Boss Li's apartment." "You didn't go back to the base?" "No, I haven't gone back. Don't you know?" Xiao Fei immediately sighed with a smile. "I left the base on the third day after you went to Cambodia. Didn't I tell you last time that my time in the base was up and it was time to go home?" "Yes, I remember." "Since you didn't go back to the base, why don't we meet?" Chapter 976. Xiao Fei didn't seem to be in a good mood. Li Nanheng's face flashed across Feng Ling's mind, and she felt that she shouldn't see Xiao Fei. "It's not convenient for me. I'd better not see you. You have your own life outside. I wish you all the best. I'm nearby. I'll be there soon. Wait for me." Xiao Fei hung up the phone. Feng Ling stood still, looking up at the cars outside the apartment, a little confused. Drill Master Qiao seemed to like her a little, but he didn't force her to do anything. As long as she didn't want to do something, he would be a gentleman and avoid her. Just now, it was clear that she didn't want to see him, but why did he suddenly become so domineering? It seemed that he had to see him. Feng Ling walked to the flower bed near the parking lot. As the weather had turned cold, the flowers in the flower bed had turned yellow. She sat by the side and reached out to pluck the yellow leaves one by one to pass the time. A car approached, and then a car honked beside her. She looked up and saw a white Bentley parked in front of her. When she was puzzled, the car window rolled down and Xiao Fei's face appeared. "Why are you in a daze? Get in the car." Seeing her clothes, the man in the car was surprised for a moment. Feng Ling looked at him. She hadn't seen him for a long time and felt that Xiao Fei's eyes seemed a little red. She got up and walked to the car door. "Drill Master Qiao, you, Drill Master? I've already left the base. There is no Drill Master here, only Xiao Fei." Xiao Fei casually put one hand on the steering wheel and looked at her with a smile. At this time, Feng Ling approached the car door and was a little close to him, so she smelled alcohol on his body. She immediately looked at his hand on the steering wheel. "Did you drink?" "A little, not much." Xiao Fei raised his eyebrows and looked at her calmly. "Get in the car. I'll take you out for a ride. I heard that there are a lot of things going on in the base recently. It's impossible for Li Nanheng to accompany you here all day. It must be very boring for you to stay here all day. You drank. Don't drive. Where do you live? I'll send you back." Feng Ling didn't intend to sit on the co-pilot's side but stood by the car door on his side. Xiao Fei raised his eyebrows and looked at her. "If I ask you to get in the car, then get in. Why are you talking so much? I didn't drink much. I promise I'll be safe. Nothing will happen." "No, you drank." Feng Ling, Xiao Fei called her name. "Listen to me and get in the car. Go sit in the front passenger seat. I'll drive you back." Feng Ling was very persistent. There was no other emotion in her eyes. She just didn't want the people she knew to have an accident because of drunk driving. Seeing her insistence, Xiao Fei's eyes paused on her for a moment, and then the corners of his mouth curved up. With that, he pushed open the car door and got out of the car. When he walked past her, he looked at her delicate and feminine short hair, then at her sportswear and white sneakers. He walked around the car and sat down beside the passenger seat. Feng Ling sat in the driver's seat, fastened her seatbelt, and asked after he got in the car, "Where do you live?" "Turn on the GPS." I'm not familiar with the environment of downtown Los Angeles. Without the GPS, even if you tell me the address, I may not be able to find it. Li Nanheng knew you were a woman long ago? Xiao Fei didn't answer but asked. Feng Ling moved her hand away from the buckle of the seat belt and turned to look at him. What do you mean long ago? I'm not sure, but now that you're dressed like this and live here, he obviously knows. Xiao Fei didn't ask much but said, when you were in the base, you were young, so it was understandable that others couldn't tell whether you were a man or a woman, but as you gradually grew up, many things couldn't be hidden, so it's not surprising that you were seen through. But according to Li Nanheng's attitude toward you, I suspect that he had long known it but didn't point it out. Feng Ling thought about it and didn't ask much, nor did she mention anything about Li Nanheng. Regardless of whether she knew about it earlier or later, she was dressed like this, which meant that she already knew about it. As for whether she knew about it earlier or later, she didn't have any particular thoughts. Anyway, it wasn't the first time that man had done all kinds of beastly things to her. Regardless of whether she was a man or a woman, just the act of him forcing her to help him with her hands was already very beastly. Why would there be a need to differentiate between a man and a woman? Where do you live? Feng Ling changed the topic and pointed to the screen of the car navigation with her eyes. Xiao Fei raised his hand, clicked on the navigation a few times, and randomly set a target location. Let's go here. Feng Ling glanced at it and saw that the destination was a hotel. She didn't think much and drove out of the condominium. On the way, although Xiao Fei's body reeked of alcohol, it wasn't too strong or unpleasant. He sat quietly in the front passenger seat and casually leaned against the seat. He didn't look ahead but at Feng Ling, who was driving. Feng Ling would be very serious in everything she did, including driving. At first, she didn't pay much attention to his gaze, but after being stared at for a long time, she still felt a little uncomfortable. Drillmaster Qiao. Xiao Fei. Or you can call me Brother Qiao like Kay and the others. Seeing that she was not used to it, he said again. Okay, Brother Qiao. Feng Ling looked ahead and said while driving, I heard other drill masters in the base say that people who leave the base, if they don't go to the military or the police but go back to work in a profession unrelated to the military, it's better not to see each other in the future. On the one hand, it's to avoid suspicion and disputes in the future. After all, you know that many secrets in the base can't be leaked, and you can't casually contact other people. With your current identity, it's not suitable for you to have too much contact with 11 base. Although both of us are tight-lipped, there are rules after all, so you'd better not see me in the future. Xiao Fei looked at her serious expression as she spoke, and the corner of his mouth hooked up. Your straightforward temper is really hurtful. I just want to see you. It's very simple and I don't have any other thoughts. It's not just a simple meeting. Then what do I have to do? Do I have to be not simple? Feng Ling didn't quite understand what he meant by not being simple. She just continued to drive and didn't ask more about things she didn't understand. If I'm really not simple, even Li Nanheng may not be able to guard against me, Xiao Fei suddenly said meaningfully. That you're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.